and have a discussion about it. So again, if you're a technical person, we have Zane in the audience as well. Would love to hear from him. But if you're a technical person, if you want to jump in, I think we're gonna start and we're gonna nail in on kind of Jordan's perspective and dive into that. And then down the road, I think we'll have time for Q&A. I think if you have specific questions as topics come up, we want to keep things focused, but after the fact we can open it up to more general Q&A depending on how much time Jordan has. But that's it for me, guys. I mean, we can jump right into this. Jordan, I have some notes here I took, um, just looking at the back and forth. But why don't you let's just take it let's start really big picture, I guess. I mean, you have a philosophy about all of this, and a technical outlook, and we'd love to hear that. Yeah, and we can start there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think it would also be very interesting to hear from Zane. He and I think very similarly, but I would love to hear from him later if he does want to join in. So my basic, let's see, philosophy idea for a world computer is, I mean, it's very similar to what Dom continues to say and what he's said for a long time, and the original vision that he sold me on. It's changed over the years just a bit, but basically around 2017, when I started looking into this project, the idea was to create a scalable, an unbounded scalable virtual machine. Basically, a virtual machine, so a computer, right? Something that can execute code, can execute instructions, that has memory, and if you add storage in there, then you're getting closer to an actual cloud platform. So basically, a decentralized, unbounded virtual machine. That was the goal. That was the vision, and he pitched it as a protocol. So a protocol is basically a set of instructions, right? RSS is a protocol. Like anyone who listens to podcasts, that's a bunch of XML files that are standardized, and you can serve up these XML files from any server from anywhere in the world, and instruct your podcast application to know exactly where to go to get the podcasts, to download them. And it's an extremely decentralized and excellent system, in my opinion. And if you've noticed, podcasting is not necessarily captured by anyone. You can't really censor podcast platforms, because if you get kicked off of Spotify, you can go to Apple. If you get kicked off of Apple, you can just host from a canister. I used to host my podcast from a canister. So that's just one example of a protocol. And ICP was pitched as protocol. It's called the Internet Computer Protocol, of course. So I have always been seeking after that vision. I want uh, an extension to the internet protocols. The internet protocols only deal with communication, essentially. It's only about sending packets from one machine to another machine, one process to another process. But imagine if you could add computation and add storage. And I think that's generally what most people are excited about with the internet computer. The idea is you can just run all of your computations 100% on chain, quote unquote, right, in a decentralized, more censorship resistant, tamper proof environment. And that all sounds exciting and great. And I've been working, I've been following the project since 2017 and been working full time ish since about 2021, 2022. So I've loved the vision. I have fought very hard for the vision, and I've been building tools like right above the protocol layer for years now. So that's all great. My problem is look, I don't feel like we have the success that we'd like to have. That doesn't mean that the protocol is flawed necessarily, but it does call into question if the protocol is flawed. And so that gets me thinking. I don't like to talk about price. I don't feel like I've almost never talked about the price publicly. But when sentiments go down and prices go down and everything, just in general, it does get you thinking more. So, um, and these are thoughts that I kind of mull over and think about over weeks, months, or years. So it's not just like, oh, there's a bunch of bad sentiment, and so I'm gonna just think these things up. It might push me to talk about it at the moment. But so yeah, there's, in my opinion, there's a lack of adoption. There's a lack of useful things being built with ICP. ICP isn't talked about as much as I think we'd like it to be talked about. It's nothing compared to Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Solana, right? It's just not. It's not up there. It's more like Cardano. Like people don't really talk about it that much, and there's not that much going on. So then that gets me thinking, well, what's wrong? What is stopping adoption? Why are people not talking about it? Why is it not spoken of with high regard by the engineers and people I look up to in other ecosystems? Some people do. Obviously, it's not nobody, but generally speaking, it's not as good as I would like it to be. And over the past few years, as I'm working with ICP, anybody who's a developer who starts to develop something non-trivial will instantly run into various roadblocks in the protocol. Unfortunately, the protocol has some very serious limitations. Number one, in my opinion, being the instruction limit. If you execute, any function for more than a few seconds, depends on the context in which you call it, but maybe 5 or 10 seconds, your function will simply trap. That means it's done. It's over. It's just an error. You cannot get around this error unless you can somehow rewrite what you're doing to be chunked up into smaller pieces. This does work for some things. Luckily, it does work for LLMs, at least for the moment. But if there's too much computation in your process and you cannot fit it into that 5 or 10 second window, it might be actually impossible to run what you want on the internet computer. And so that's just one example, but there are many other examples of super high latency of when you're talking from one canister to another canister to another canister across subnets. That latency builds up, 2, 3, 5 seconds per hop between subnets. That creates a massive amount of latency. Bob Bodley's company Odin, or the new project Odin, their architecture is based around a single canister now. Why? Because they could not get the UX to work in multiple canisters. And I've always kind of been a fan of scaling the single canister because, when I built the pseudograph project, which is a GraphQL database, I started in a single canister and I wanted to scale beyond a single canister. But doing that, I knew would be incredibly complicated. And I've been, kind of vindicated in thinking that with, Byron from CanDB has similar thoughts as well. And then CanDB is the multi-canister database project. So many, there are, I don't want to exaggerate it, but there are a handful of very serious limitations that prevent ICP, in my opinion. It doesn't even compete with AWS. It doesn't even compete with Azure. It does not compete with the centralized cloud platforms. People want it to be, the place that we're going to deploy all software. Well, it can't even deploy, I would say, most of what you can deploy onto AWS. You can't even deploy like a SQL database. Obviously, there are some experiments. Azel has SQLite support. There in Rust canisters, you can also compile like IC SQLite and things like that. But I'm talking about being able to pull off the shelf MongoDB or Postgres and shove it in a canister and start going. You can't do that. You cannot just pip install, npm install, or cargo install any package that you want. For example, HTTP, the most common, at least at the application layer, the most common networking protocol that all developers are going to use. That's just the basic way you can communicate on the internet. If you want to use that, you have to rewrite your entire application because ICP's HTTP implementation, number one, it's not a full implementation of HTTP. And number two, it's its own esoteric API. It doesn't use like fetch or TCP sockets under the hood. So you have to use basically a virtual canister called the management canister. You have to call into a canister to do it. Well, there's no software in the world that's written for that except for ICP software. So if I want to pull something like Express or Flask or something off the shelf, it just won't work. Express actually does work pretty well now because we did a lot of work in Hazel to get it to work. But other other packages and other ecosystems are not going to work. And ASIL doesn't have, full implementations of these things yet. So yeah, you can't just run all software. You'll hit instruction limits. You just won't be able to compile it possibly, or if you compile it and deploy it, it simply won't run at runtime. And Dom keeps saying you don't need databases. We have orthogonal persistence. That orthogonal persistence is not a solution to the need for databases. Databases are like an application layer abstraction and set of functionalities that let you perform complex queries and complex updates. It doesn't matter if you're using orthogonal persistence under the hood or not. The developers need these things if they're going to build anything that's non-trivial. And I know this is basically a 100% fact. And many people in the ecosystem would like databases. So I don't know why that keeps getting pushed. In my opinion, is quite incorrect. And yeah, there's just I feel like the ICP roadmap it is not focusing. A lot of the things it's focusing on very good, but I think there are some key fundamental limitations that are not getting the attention that they need to get. And if they don't get that attention, we will not be able to deploy the software that we want to deploy. And many use cases will continue to be impossible. So maybe that's a little bit of a introduction, a rundown.
Yeah, that was a lot. I want to give a chance, Kyle, Trevor, and then Zane, of course. Zane is up on stage now. Zane, if you want to piggyback off anything there or echo anything Jordan said or add in a new perspective, why don't we go to Zane and then I'll pass it over to Kyle or Trevor if they have any questions, initial questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So yeah, not much to add to what Jordan said. I pretty much agree with everything. He almost hit all the points I wanted to make. So the IC as a protocol versus IC as a network, the limitations, especially the round limits, and some of the, let's say, a bit like less true or not completely true advertising of oh you do not need databases on the IC that is often pushed, which I mean, if you want to build a very simple application, that's true, and it is easier to persist data on the IC compared to Web 2 standard software. But if you're building an enterprise application or whatever that is not an MVP, you often end up having to recreate at least some components that resemble a database, a worse one. But yeah, you still have to essentially recreate all the access control logic. You have no query language. You have to handle backups. Although, as of recently, we got snapshots, which might help with that. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Kyle, Trevor, any thoughts, any initial questions?
No, I mean, I was kind of like hearing a little bit of it. I just got in the house here a little bit ago, but one of the things that stuck out was Jordan saying something that like specifically like certain areas need attention. What specific areas are you looking for like attention, and is that like marketing attention, or is that like attention where it needs dev lift, or what are those like areas that you're seeing?
Yeah, number one is the instruction limit. I think massive resource, R&D resources should go into completely eliminating the instruction limit, not just raising it, but completely eliminating it. So that's one. And the instruction limit, in case you don't know, it's I believe it's for a general update call. It's 40 billion instructions. They might have raised it slightly recently. We'd have to look it up. But yeah, 40 billion instructions. And after that, your code will just stop running. It cannot run. 40 billion instructions. Our processors on your phone or on your laptop are going to be around 3 billion instructions or cycles per second. So it's a rough equivalent. So 30 divided by, or 40 divided by 3, you're going to have a few seconds worth of computation. So that's number one. In my opinion, that is absolutely number one. And the problem is that there is a fundamental limitation on something called the checkpoint boundary. The nodes in the subnet checkpoint their state periodically so that new nodes coming on can catch up. And my understanding is that there is a fundamental limitation with having a computation go across that boundary. That node, as far as I know, no one knows how to solve this. So until we solve that, we will not be able to raise the limit beyond that point. So I think that needs to be addressed. I'm looking at some of my old points because I'll mention some things that have improved. The memory limitations, up until very recently, ICP has been limited to 4 gigabytes of memory. Relatively small, not the smallest possible, but relatively small, especially compared to what you could possibly get with deploying to AWS. But it works okay. But to start fitting larger AI models or other things, if you really want to use orthogonal persistence and store your variables on the heap, you're going to need a bigger heap. Luckily, WASM64 is basically the solution to that problem. So that one actually doesn't worry me. The memory limitations are basically, in my opinion, they're solved. Number 3 would be high latencies. I mentioned if your application cannot scale within a single canister because of memory storage or just general scalability limits, like if you have too many people wanting to use your canister, you might need to split up your canister into multiple canisters. The problem is that as soon as you put a canister outside of the same subnet as another canister, the subnet abstraction, you might say, it starts to leak and really affects what you're doing because the latency to go between subnets is very high. It's like a few seconds, 2 or 5 seconds. So every time you want to do a cross-canister call to another subnet, it's going to be a few seconds, and that will add linearly as you continue to go across subnets. If you're within the same subnet, that will help. But this is not very good. There are message size limits. Well, let's see. Today, I was just thinking, let's see. Sorry. Maybe besides the message size limits, you cannot take off-the-shelf software. Some off-the-shelf software you can, if it's very simple, just like pure computations that aren't using any kind of even normal APIs with the OS. You cannot take that off the shelf and run it on the internet computer. If it has any HTTP dependency whatsoever, like let's say you just wanted to use Stripe or something, that will just not work. It will just break. In Hazel, it's getting close, but it will definitely not work in Rust. And in Motoko doesn't even have this kind of stuff. So I think basically getting WASI implemented, we have the first preview version of WASI implemented in ICP, but with a polyfill. So it's not necessarily a full implementation, but it's pretty good. If we could get the second version of WASI implemented, WASI provides low-level APIs to normal operating system functionality. I think we need to get this normal operating system functionality, networking protocols like HTTP, maybe even lower level like TCP. We need that kind of stuff to be implemented. File systems, etc. The WASI Preview 1 does have a file system, which works pretty well, which is great. But ICP needs to be an environment similar to any other computational environment. It can't be its own thing where you have to rewrite all software. So I think putting massive amounts of effort into WASI would be another thing. Then there are memory limits. You can only upload 2 megabyte messages, and you can only get back like a 2 or 3 megabyte message depending on the context. So that's okay as a user, kind of, until you want to download something huge, and then it takes forever. Or if you want to upload something huge, it will take absolutely forever to do that. And they are improving that. That one I'm not super worried about. There are some things like hash block payloads and maybe some other things that could overcome that. I don't feel like that's a fundamental limitation. It's also relatively expensive, right? I also don't think that's the worst because at least you can implement something. It might be more expensive to implement it on ICP, But if you are thinking about the replication and the being autonomous and censorship resistance, then maybe the cost can be justified. But then there's also this very, very rigid network architecture. I just don't. I don't like that you deploy an application into a static subnet with static participants, and you're kind of stuck there. Obviously, they're working on a few things like being able to migrate your canister from one subnet to another canister. But in my opinion, the subnet abstraction is too rigid. It's sad that we even have to think about subnets. It introduces latency, and it introduces just a lot of, I would say, I don't know, just general complications. And then the DAO itself, in my opinion, is kind of centralized. I just don't see ICP going mainstream across the whole world when you have to ask for permission. Well, not, asking for permission, I guess, is okay, right? We have ICANN and things like that. But the fact that you have to go to this DAO, purchase ICP, join this kind of esoteric community to get started, it just, in my opinion, feels off-putting. And I think it'd be much better if ICP was truly a protocol like the other ones, where you just read the spec, implement it on hardware. I guess a little bit more like AO. I'm not saying AO is necessarily better, but in all ways, but it might have some advantages in its flexibility and being more of a protocol that allows you to weave together disparate, I guess disparate hardware with different memory and computing requirements. So those are some of the things I think need to be addressed.
Zane, go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing I like to mention that doesn't often gets brought up, but because maybe right now it is not felt much as an issue, but if the network has to scale and accommodate for more user, it will come up at some point. Is the limit for ingress messages? Because right now, as Jordan said, each ingress message can be up to 2 megabyte. The problem is to sync all this data and have fast block finality, there cannot be that many messages in the same block. Otherwise, just syncing the blocks takes really long time, even with the hashed payloads. And so right now, each subnet has more or less 1K ingress messages that can be accepted in each block. And ingress messages are essentially user transactions or transactions from other canisters. But so let's say you want to build your own application. For each subnet, only 1,000 messages a second can be accepted. So as of recently, after the Bybit hack, somebody on Twitter said, asked them, why don't we build a full DEX on chain? Are there any limitations, something like this? And he said, oh yeah, each canister has a limit of 500 transactions per second, because for the canister is a bit lower than the whole subnet. So right now, if you were to take all the subnets that exist on the IC, which is around 40, and you add them up together, you get 40K TPS. And that is a problem because an exchange like Binance does much, much more. And it's not economically viable to scale the network this way, to add subnets, which are really expensive, just to get 1K more. And just for a single exchange. This is not for like 10 of them. It's just to replicate Binance, Coinbase, whatever. And I think this is an issue. And in part, this issue is caused by the fact that not only the network topology, so the number of nodes in a subnet, but also the network configuration, so stuff like the ingress message size, the round limits, and so on, has been thought pre-Genesis by Dfinity to maximize the potential of the protocol and to showcase you can build full stack application using it, which is great. And right now, it's the only way we can do this. If you want to have hex clone on chain, ICP is the only way to do it. But if you want to make a decentralized exchange or some financial application, what it really needs is maximize decentralization, you do not need 500 gigabytes of storage. You do not need 2 megabytes for ingress messages, because usually DeFi transactions are really, really small. What you need is as many nodes as possible to maximize the replication factor, and you need to have the highest TPS possible. Because again, even if you want to scale it using multiple subnets, first of all, it adds complexity, as Jordan said, to developers, and it's not economically viable because the benefits you get as you scale horizontally um, are not that much. So I like to see that go. And maybe one way this could be done is by having more subnet types and having like DeFi subnets, or I don't know, financial subnets, which also perhaps could provide faster node shuffling, higher node counts, perhaps even the possibility to run light nodes so that user can self-verify their own transactions and not completely rely on a fixed set of node providers being honest. So yeah. And other than that, I agree with Jordan on the fact that as many limitations should be lifted. Uh, but I'm a bit cautious around some stuff, like maybe the HTTP or more low-level OS integrations, because we always have to remember that the software that runs in the virtual machine has to be deterministic in nature. So we provided the same set of inputs, the output has to be the same, otherwise consensus cannot be reached, and there is potentially a problem with doing stuff like HTTP calls that introduce non-deterministic inputs. So that I might not care that much about, at least for now. But what I really want to see, and I think what would really make the IC succeed is if it provided a replicated state machine that can run any deterministic software.
And so to achieve that, Zane, would that require? I mean, I'm trying to think like what would that require? Because one thing I like that you mentioned was the idea of different subnets, right? And we're going to get different subnets. I think they're talking about GPU subnets. They're talking about stuff with AI. I mean, to achieve what you're talking about there specifically, and then I want to pass it to Trev. But what would you need to do? I mean, is this like fundamentally to the protocol? Like, what needs to happen?
So firstly, some of the limitations like the round limit have to be removed because they are not only a problem for uh, financial applications. Maybe they're not even that much of a problem for DeFi and stuff, but more for huge databases. Like if you want to build something big, that becomes an issue. So that has to go ideally. We have to maximize, especially on the smallest best case subnets, which is what we have right now, the throughput and the TPS we can achieve. Because let's keep this in mind, okay? The IC is a great protocol, but to achieve this level of scalability that we have right now, it also made some trade-offs. And these trade-offs comes with permission nodes, really powerful hardware, and a limited node count. So we should get as much as possible out of it. And right now, the main bottleneck, in my opinion, for scaling, especially if you have a lot of user, is removing or raising as much as possible this ingress message limit per subnet. And perhaps regarding the subnet types, we need more experimentation because right now we haven't experimented that much. Uh, like, yeah, we have application subnets with 13 nodes, fiduciary or system, I guess it's the new terminology, subnets, which have around 40. Um, and that's pretty much it. The configuration in terms of the execution environment is also very much similar. There are some minor differences, but not that many, and they are being reduced as much as possible. So maybe, first of all, we need to figure out, there might be not really a problem, but one side cannot fit all the use cases. So we need to figure out what these use cases are and which is the most ideal configuration for them, and then just create these subnets, experiment, and see how it goes. And finally, then I leave it to Trevor. Uh, I think Dfinity, when they're thinking about the protocol and like designing new features, they shouldn't make too many assumptions on the topology and the configurations, because otherwise we are kind of like stuck in a hole, and it's hard to take a different path.
Go ahead, Trev.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit to what Kyle said. So, um, from my personal point of view, right, we have a lot of developers here on IC, but I'm in agreement with Jordan as far as the network being very rigid. Um, I explored a little bit of WebSockets, right, and I applaud you for that improvement, Jordan, because that is seriously very useful. But we do have limitations, right? And just from my experience of developing on IC, is we lack the plugins to make this an easy process. Like when you're trying to integrate or build something, if the plugins aren't currently built, you kind of have to do it yourself. Um, just kind of as far as storage, right? You have Firebase on Google. You have Amplify for AWS. We kind of lack those easy plugin options to get from point A to point B. You kind of have to go through like point A through K in order to get to the final end, which is kind of questionable, right? We have a lot of these developers, but we lack the ease of access of plugins, which we are improving on, and I have seen some improvements, but it is just not at the speed of scale of other ecosystems that make it a little bit more user friendly to bring in, average developers who are exploring the ecosystem and exploring these methods of building, but don't have an in-depth everyday knowledge of the network, right? I'm somebody who, yeah, I'm tech friendly, but I don't have an in-depth knowledge such as Jordan does, and so being able to build on IC is kind of difficult compared to building on other networks where it's a little bit more friendly and the tools are already built there for you, and it makes kind of finishing your product from A to B a lot easier, than it probably should be.
I'll jump in a little bit on that too. So like what you notice with like a lot of different ecosystems with what Trevor was mentioning with like the plugins is there's already like so many different plugins that a dev could come in and like leverage to help build out their product and scale, like immediately. And one of the things I actually noticed, we started up like a unofficial Odin Fun community on OpenChat, and ironically, OpenChat's doing like a botathon right now, and we've saw like an influx of like Bitcoiners come into the community, and they're all starting to like think out like what kind of bots and stuff they're going to make around like open chat and Odin Fun, which has been great because like we need to see a lot of that. And um, these people are essentially going to start making all these different plugins and bots and stuff that people can leverage. And I just haven't seen a lot of that to kind of like reflect what Trevor was saying. Like there's great dev plugins, don't get me wrong, on the IC, but they're not um, like super accessible to where everyone can just go find them right away with like ease of access. Like we have like the ecosystem showcase page, right, and it shows a bunch of different projects right there, but I don't see like a plugin thing like that's easily accessible for someone that you could just be like, hey, like here's everything that you could possibly go through in this library. I personally don't like see that, but I'm also more of like marketing and lately like just content in general, so we've been on the go, so like there's probably a lot of stuff that I haven't seen lately on the IC. So but yeah, if there is like something like that that's an easy thing that I could use to like show people, that would be great. That would be very helpful.
I think this is a big conversation, and right now we don't have any Definity engineers. Like, it'd be great to have Jan or Dom in here to really take it forward, because I don't think, myself, Kyle, or Trevor, we're not the ones who can really keep this going in a super, I guess, productive way. I think to carry things forward, I mean, I have a couple of questions I'd love to just ask generally, but I also just at this point want to open it up to the audience. If anybody wants to come up here and ask a question or provide a comment and keep things running, feel free. But Jordan, I wanted to get your perspective on a couple of things. The first thing is denial of service protection. And then the second one is I wanted to just get a little bit more insight into the scaling issue, because this ties in a lot of stuff. But like Zane mentioned with the ingress message limit, and then subnets in general, right? And the limitations of subnets and scaling large applications, especially if you want to keep them performant. Um, I'm trying to understand, because like when I read some of the posts that Dom puts out, I was reading the back and forth today, and it all sounds good, but the number one issue for me, just that to me, like, I don't understand with this perspective, with Dom's perspective, is how do you scale performant apps? And again, I'm not the most technical, so I can't really decipher the roadmap and put all this together. But two things really is just, is it possible? Like, I know denial of service has been an issue, and this has been discussed. I don't know if you just pipe requests through Cloudflare, if that's a thing, or if ICP will have like protocol native mitigation technology, whatever. But if you have any thoughts on that, and then also just again back to scaling, I'm trying to understand, I guess, Definity's perspective on this. I don't know if you can provide maybe what they're planning to do in terms of scaling, especially with like protocol native scaling, where just like with AWS, you pop something in and you configure it and it will elastically scale based on parameters. So I'm thinking like with Caffeine, right? If Caffeine deploys a canister and it reaches a certain number of limits, will Caffeine be able to orchestrate a multi-subnet architecture, a multi-subnet app? Would be able to kind of monitor traffic and make adjustments? I mean, it's really complicated when you get into the idea of scaling. So, Zane, Jordan, if either of you want to lend some perspectives on those two subjects, I'd love to hear more.
Yes. Okay, there were two what was the first subject again?
Denial of, I
Yes.
guess
Okay.
so. Yeah, if we could go into like, I guess, are there best practices? Like I said, like, can you pipe requests through Cloudflare right now, and can that protect your application? And then I guess, I don't know, I've been looking at the forums, and I think denial of service has been a talked about issue, and I'm not sure if there are any like concrete uh set in stone approaches that are planned, where it's like, yeah, this is going to take care of all of these risks and these attack vectors. I just would like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, my understanding and experience is there's not like an obvious solution to the DDoS or the denial of service problem. Just to make sure people understand, denial of service essentially is when you flood an application with too many requests, and those requests take up too many resources. So X has been under attack lately, yesterday, today, or something. What happened? Well, I imagine there were many computers, bots, servers somewhere in the world, maybe multiple places, that just decided to make as many requests as they possibly could to the public X APIs. And so, what did that do? Well, it made legitimate requests unable to be handled as well as they could be. This is a problem for basically any web application. So ICP is not necessarily immune to this, right? The basic subnet that most applications will be deployed into, at least right now, has 13 nodes. So that's 13 independent machines. You would just have to DDoS those independent machines, find the IP address, which would be trivial to find, and then start flooding it with requests. There are a few ways to mitigate this. The boundary nodes are basically, most requests by default are going to go through boundary nodes that kind of sit on the edge of the network. They basically take incoming requests and route them to canisters. Those nodes do have rate limits built in, is my understanding. And I believe I've run into those rate limits. So that's your first level of defense. And then, and they can have whatever, the boundary nodes can have whatever kind of stuff they want, I believe, in front of them. So I don't know if you could put Cloudflare itself right in front of a boundary node, but I assume, once the request comes into your boundary node, if you're using Cloudflare, maybe you could proxy that back to your boundary node, which will then proxy it to the canisters themselves. But yeah, that's the first level of defense, boundary nodes. But then you might want to have application-specific defense. And the only real way I know as a developer to protect yourself is something called inspect message. And this is basically a query function that will run before any update call. And in there, you can do some logic. You can look at the parameters of the message, and basically of the update call coming in, and look at the principal, the ID of the caller. And maybe you could filter people out there like, oh, well, you haven't signed up for an account, so I'm just going to deny this message. I don't know, though, if those two things combined are enough. My understanding is, I was just thinking today, like, well, how is X taking care of this problem? I mean, I think you basically just have to figure out which IP address to block and which not to block. And giving them enough resources and enough time, it's probably impossible to stop an attack. But generally, I imagine the attackers run out of interest or resources to keep going, and the people under attack just have more infrastructure and can block faster. So that's what I know about the situation. In my opinion, it's not necessarily an elegantly solved problem in ICP, but you do have a few ways to mitigate those things.
Interesting. And then could we touch on the cross subnet or the multi subnet scaling as well? This is just like, to me, it seems like one of the, especially for, I guess, enterprise, right? And Dom has talked about caffeine in the context of, enterprise CRM or some of these enterprise systems. And I'm thinking, well, at a certain point, if you want to scale in terms of, I guess, the number of requests you can handle concurrently, or if you want to scale in terms of storage, you need to go multi-subnet. And like you guys have mentioned, it's every single cross subnet leap adds 2 to 5 seconds. I know there's a forum post that they went into the math behind this, but it's significant. And so I'm trying to understand what, because I know like this is a 20-year roadmap, right? So what is the vision for scaling, and is there is the idea that eventually in this current paradigm that scaling would be abstracted to the point where the developer almost wouldn't have to worry about it? They could almost parameterize their app just like you can do with AWS, where you set in certain constraints and the app will elastically scale. And then you have all sorts of other things. Like, it's very important to have, certain protections in place, DDoS stuff, because you see this with a lot of people hosting through Vercel. Somebody will attack their application and it will run their hosting bill way up, right? So there's, you have to have the ability to elastically scale for genuine requests, but then you also have to have the ability to protect against malevolent requests. But I'm just, in terms of like the vision for scalable apps, multi subnet scaling patterns and things like this, I don't know if you have any perspective into kind of the here and now, and then maybe what's coming down the road with roadmap milestones. And we also have Kyle in the building. I know Kyle is not necessarily an engineer, but if you want to jump in, Kyle, I sent you an invite. But yeah, Jordan, Zane, if you have any thoughts on that as well, I'm very curious.
Did you have something to say, Zane? I have a few thoughts. I can go after you, though.
No, you can go ahead. Don't worry.
So, yeah, I just want to emphasize, like, this is the kind of thing that I think needs an extreme amount of attention from the protocol engineers, because this is a running into a fundamental limit of the architecture of the internet computer. If we want Byzantine fault tolerance, that's basically like the highest level of security when we're talking about integrity, so not allowing through state changes that are not authorized. Byzantine fault tolerance gives you just amazing security, assuming enough nodes are honest, essentially, right? Up to a certain threshold. So the way ICP achieves that is through replication. So you have 13 to 40 nodes, and they all agree on what messages they will execute, and then they execute them deterministically. And if there's anything wrong in that process, then the security guarantees start to break down, essentially. So that process, unfortunately, has a lot of latency built in, because these nodes are possibly spread all across the world, and you have to have multiple rounds of communication to implement the protocol securely. So these are fundamental limits. Unfortunately, before all the papers came out and everything, I thought that Dfinity had discovered some new, like, novel, revolutionary consensus mechanism. Unfortunately, that was not the case. They're using a consensus mechanism that is very similar to others like Tendermint and Hot Stuff, and maybe PBFT, Practical Business Default Tolerance. They've tweaked it, and it might be better in certain ways, but it's not just some silver bullet thing that gives you like instant consensus. It's running into the similar limitations to all these other protocols. So unfortunately I don't know. This is something that makes me very concerned, because going across subnets just instantly complicates everything and ruins a lot of user experience and possibly developer experience. But from the roadmap, which I haven't dived into the new, like, as of the last few days or week or so, roadmap entirely, but the only thing I'm seeing is essentially subnet splitting, which is and canister migration. So basically, if you're in a subnet and the subnet is getting too crowded, it looks like the idea is to be able to split that into multiple subnets, and then you would, I don't know, keep half of the canisters or whatever heuristic they'll use. But and so that will scale you out horizontally, but that does not solve the inter subnet issues. I don't really know. I don't see an elegant way to do this without fundamentally re-architecting the subnet abstraction, which I kind of feel like we should do. I haven't been a fan of the subnet abstraction ever since I found out about it, like maybe right before launch. So unfortunately, I don't have any super good news on it.
Before I go to Cupcake, I mean, so what you're talking about, because I've read a lot of your forum posts talking about, I essentially paraphrasing, I'm wondering if there isn't a need to fundamentally re-architect the protocol at the lowest levels. What I'm curious about, I guess, is this idea, like scaling applications for, I guess, requests and storage. Like, number one, if you're going to do it with subnets, there's always going to be hard limits. But if you're not going to do it with subnets, it's like, how do you have replication? And so I guess, as a non-engineer, non-technical person, I mean, yeah, it's do you have any just initial feelings about, because one thing I'm also wondering is, it's like, well, Dfinity, we have all these nodes on standby. Is it possible to run experiments in the background? I mean, like, what's nice about subnets is you can have a diverse set of subnets that operate under, using different configurations, different parameters, and so that gives flexibility to the system. But outside of the currently running system, it's totally possible to run experiments. And so, in terms of, like, any initial feelings you have, Jordan, about, what would be an interesting experiment to run? What would be an interesting network setup to try out? I mean, um, do you have any thoughts on that? And again, this whole idea of like you have subnets and replication, but then if you remove subnets, you can scale an app with just adding more machines. But then you don't necessarily get, I think, the replication. I might have that wrong, but yeah. Any initial thoughts, man?
Yeah,
And then let's go Cupcake and then Zane.
so, but we're running into like the fundamental reason. Well, these are the concerns that have me thinking about the things I've been posting the last couple of days. I am starting to think that having Byzantine fault tolerance through replicated computation, I'm being very specific. Byzantine fault tolerance through actually replicating the computation itself. I'm starting to think that that will never scale. It will never, ever do what we want it to do. You'll never be able to deploy Twitter, for example, and have it be Byzantine fault tolerant through replicated computation. That's why I'm so excited about zero knowledge proving or validity proving, because you can basically remove replicated computation and combine that with just consensus on what's going in, like basically consensus on all of the messages, but then compute it on one node. All right, you are able to then prove that the computation was correct, and you have the consensus on what's going in. You have a proof that you ran it through a deterministic virtual machine like WASM or something, and then, well, you might like this might open up a lot, many more ways that we can scale without having to have the very, very heavy, bulky subnets. And if you want censorship resistance, for example, well, then you just have some, maybe 3 or 5 entities or as many as you want on standby. And this is called a failover. It's a failover instead of a replica. It's like, hey, if this goes down, then we'll just spin another one up over here. And you could make it as beefy as you want. Could just be absolutely huge, like the biggest, whatever on AWS you can spin up for your biggest instance. You could just have that crunching everything. And then you use a combination of zero knowledge proofs, and you still use consensus through blockchain, but possibly more as a coordinator. Obviously this isn't fully thought through, and Dom had some ideas about it, but I just don't think replicated computation is going to scale us. So, yeah, did that answer your question? I can't remember.
Yeah. I mean, it again, this is such a big conversation, I think, and it's really difficult, I think, to productively dial in on any one thing. So it's all good. But Cupcake, you put your hand down, but did you want to jump in?
Yes, Zen, thank you very much for putting the spaces together tonight. And Jordan and Zane, appreciate the deep, fantastic technical feedback that you're providing. So I wanted to know about the relationship between the NNS and Dfinity from a legal perspective. Like if a proposal goes through on the NNS to prioritize maybe something we all decide should be a priority, and we take one of these ideas and put in a proposal for Dfinity to prioritize, are they legally required to then prioritize that idea based on the proposal being approved? I'd like to hear anyone's feedback on that.
I would say no, Cupcake. Dfinity is a foundation. It's a separate organization from the NNS. So in terms of the two being legally intertwined, I don't think there's anything. So if you put forward like a motion proposal to elect a new CEO, Dfinity would not be obligated to abide by the outcome of that vote, right?
Got it. Okay. So it's basically so it's just whatever crowd influence that we can give to prioritize these ideas.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a super big fan of doing a lot with the motion proposals, because it's basically just what is the community sentiment, and then you would have to trust that Dfinity or whatever other people are contributing to the protocol. Just trust that they're gonna, do that. Whereas the other types of proposals that actually, for example, change the binary that essentially is the protocol or moves nodes in and out of subnets, those are much more automatic. So they don't even necessarily need to be legally binding because they are technically binding. In, not 100%, right? But if the protocol's working correctly and there's enough honest actors, you push up a proposal with a new binary and it gets adopted, all nodes across all the subnets, uh, according to the rules of the proposals, will automatically upgrade. And so, yeah, in my opinion, we should push as much into that layer as we possibly can, because any other layer is much more, social in nature.
So what do you need help with to develop the momentum to be able to do something like that?
Do something like what in particular? Sorry.
Like submitting a proposal, like you said, to change a binary from the community, but not from Dfinity.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, if you actually wanted to change the binary itself, you would basically have to convince all the people that are voting on the binary. Right now, I haven't checked in a while, but I assume it's very similar. Dfinity actually has most of the voting power appointed to them at the moment because it's a liquid democracy. So many token holders, either at the beginning of the protocol, decided to follow Dfinity or have continued to follow Dfinity or chosen now to do that. So they basically, I like to say that they have right access to the protocol at the moment. You would basically have that right now. You would have to convince Dfinity, hey, my binary is the one to go through. So that's practically not going to happen. Is the idea?
But even if it didn't go through, wouldn't it send a message?
Sure. If they're, yeah, I think a lot of social consensus is very important. And that's part of why I like to speak up on Twitter or in the forum and these spaces. If we can get enough people that want something to be implemented, you don't necessarily you don't have to produce a whole binary and create a proposal. You could just start with, let's have some discussions on Twitter. Let's have some discussions in the forum. If everybody's literally against it, maybe you should stop. But if it looks promising, well, then let's open a PR. So me and the from oh man, I haven't talked to him in a while. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this. But a long time ago, the internet identity wallet or whatever canister had, I think it was the front end. There was some major problem we had with it where it's like, hey, this seems very insecure. Wouldn't it be great if you guys fixed this right away? But it didn't really seem like the defenders wanted to fix it super fast or something. So we decided to make a fork, fix it ourselves, and then just make a PR. The PR forced them to look at it, and then they started looking at it. They didn't actually reject it. They kind of rewrote the whole thing themselves, but we actually got our change in because we did that. So there's a lot of things you can do before even making a proposal. And then, yeah, if you made a proposal, and even if it got rejected, if there was enough support, then that could help. If there's not enough support, in the end, it's a democracy based on how much ICP you hold. So that's in the end, and in the worst case or the best case, depending on what side you would be on, the idea is, at least with completely open source protocols, ICP does have some licenses that would prohibit this last time I checked. But that's why Bitcoin forks, right? That's why Ethereum has forked in the past, because when you have two groups that cannot agree, you can always just fork the software.
Zane, did you want to jump in?
Yep. But I like to add that recently, 2 weeks ago, not last, 2 weeks ago, there was one ICOS version election. So essentially, this binary that is used to upgrade the network that was approved, and it contained one of the few contributions from the community. So Aviato Labs and the Cyclops team had required some stuff, and they coded it themselves. Then a Dfinity engineer stepped in to review the code and merged it into the main repo. So I think that's a nice step into the right direction. Having more contribution from the community will be nice. It's really complex because, well, the protocol itself is complex, and also a lot of knowledge about it is internal to Dfinity. So you either have to dig through the forums or ask Adab directly. So it's not really easy to step in and start making changes without breaking everything. And I think one of the problems with that, and with many other things that we have faced over the years, is the protocol is not fully open source, which on its own is an issue. First of all, because this is a blockchain, and I mean, when you talk about decentralization of the whole internet, but there are licenses on components of the code base. I don't know. It doesn't really fit well with the narrative. I understand that maybe at Genesis there was they wanted to prevent others from stealing all their work and front running them, but as far as I know, there are licenses that prevent it, and many projects actually use them. So, like you release the code, and after 3 years, everybody can use it, but you have those 3 years of advantage. Plus, the foundation has a lot of resources. So, if they can be outpaced by competitors using a 3-year-old code base and with way less resources, then there might be a problem there. Going back to what Jordan said, I agree that maybe subnets are not ideal for a perfect work computer. But Dfinity had their reasons at the times for choosing this architecture, and it's all about trade-offs. I'm not a huge fan again, but like I see why it was decided at the time. Maybe in another podcast we can talk more deeply about the implications and what alternatives there might be. But in my opinion, right now we like it's perhaps too late to change. It's almost too fundamental of a change. I also agree that BFT consensus has many limitations and might not be um, like the perfect solution for a work computer. Perhaps in 10, 15 years, the state of the art project will look very differently. And that's why Dfinity doesn't have to become complacent in what they have achieved, but always do R&D, always look at what's coming out, research papers, and try to be ahead. Because if you look at the projects we had 6 years ago, how and they were the state of the art, bleeding edge at the time. Where are they now? Most of them are dead, most likely. So we don't have to be complacent in what we have, saying, "Oh yeah, we are the most performant, we are the fastest blockchain," but we always have to be on our feet because yeah, I mean the space moves really fast, technologically speaking. But BFT consensus, I think, right now is perhaps the only option. Uh, there is a lot of work going on with Zeki proofs. Maybe they are on the horizon, and in 5 years, they might become viable for big scale applications. They certainly provide, in my opinion, a better situation because, like, BFT is limited by speed of light, and I don't think we are going to find any solution to that anytime soon. And if we did, blockchains will be the last thing that we would work on, most likely. While ZK proofs are like research based or like finding math breakthroughs and hardware based. So building hardware to accelerate those processes. And this is more achievable in the near term. So again, we always have to look for better options. Um, and that's pretty much it. I like to see, again, more experimentation. And in my opinion, if the protocol were truly open source, uh, we would have seen that. If we were able to more easily create new subnets, spin up our own, and see how they run, like we might already have been there. maybe even enterprise adoption, because I don't think many enterprises want to build and contribute to a project they don't fully own. And that's why Linux is like one of the most used OSs, because everyone can take it, modify however they want, and use it, and then they're free to share it, monetize it however they want, no strings attached. Like I usually mention Utopia, which has recently become a thing, and it has become a thing only now because Dfinity had to create it, because like as an individual or a group of people didn't have legally the permission to say, okay, we want to take this code, modify it for enterprise purposes, and resell it, create a separate network. So that limits experimentation, and like it doesn't foster adoption, especially in this space where everybody's used to open protocols and sharing. There is no secret source in crypto. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
We got Wyatt on stage and Kyle. Wyatt, I believe you might be involved with ZK. I'm sorry, Novanet, which is a ZK project. Just looking at your bio, but let's go to Wyatt and then Kyle. If you wanted to jump in, we'll go to you afterwards.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this. It was interesting. Actually, Jordan invited me to come on. He was the first person who introduced the concept of ZK WASM to me. But now I run a company that actually has like the leading and cutting edge ZK WASM implementation based on folding schemes. But I think it's pretty interesting reading through like the thread with Jordan and some people from Dfinity talking about ZK and other approaches. I never see like cryptography as like things against one another. People like play ZK versus T versus FHE versus whatever else might be out there. But really, all these things work together. They're all just mathematics that you can use to get certain results. So I was actually one of the first people who had a grant to get a ZKB verifier to work on the IC blockchain. And Jens Groth was actually on the panel that approved that grant at the time. They're like, for most blockchains, they're really constrained to using something called Groth 16, which is a very specific type of a ZKP, and it takes many months. Like if you have a brand new proving scheme that comes out that's super fast at one specific problem, you have to kind of rework it for it to fit on like Ethereum or other EVM based blockchains. It could take months. It could potentially not even be possible at all. So if you see something like, hey, this brand new scheme is really cool for, it's very fast and whatnot, most of the time those people are going to spend months trying to get it to fit onto Ethereum. And one of the first reasons why the grant exists is, hey, we can do this in like a week or two, just by doing it on the IC. So I see ZK actually being very beneficial for the IC and vice versa. Like we can get verifiers automatically on chain much easier, and then we can have those trigger things on other blockchains as well. So I think they're actually very synergistic and not actually competing whatsoever. I do agree with Dom that like the data still needs to go under BFT. Like you still need a data layer and an orchestration layer. But for like general computation, if you have a ZK WASM, like you can compute anything you want on your local computer. With our stuff, we make it super memory efficient. So on most people's computers, even in your browsers, you can compute whatever you want and verify to anyone in the world very succinctly. Basically, what you were running is correct. And this is something that's extremely powerful. And you can keep things private as well. So like you can imagine running a model locally that scans your eyeball and it's biometric, and you're not giving anyone that biometric data. You're just proving the fact that you ran that model, it did scan your eyeball, and therefore like they should trust it. So it's I would say one of the most powerful primitives that's in cryptography, but it's not the only one. There's FHE and a few other things that are super cool as well. But I think it's really going to be the mixing and matching. And Web3 as a term should just be like the front end of and cryptography as the back end kind of mentality, rather than being like, oh, we only use this one thing, like we're not going to have this other thing. I think everything's going to be a big mix, and there's going to be L1s that are basically layers that are for data and for world computers in the sense that they are the source of truth for most of the where the proofs are held, where the data is held, but they might not be the sort like where the computation is done more generally.
Can I just say something real quick to what he said? Just real quick. It's not. I just want to say it. I agree a lot, and I think part of what I was trying to say in the last couple of days is I think we're going to have heterogeneous solutions. That the world computer will be heterogeneous. It will be a variety of technologies, a variety of hardware, etc. But ICP is not that. ICP is too rigid. ICP has gone all in on replicated BFT, and like Zane said, it is not open source. I haven't thought too much recently about how much innovation that could be blocking. I don't know how much, but it's true, you cannot fork the protocol. And the fact that Dfinity controls the protocol entirely through liquid democracy, it is liquid, but the problem is that the protocol allows for one entity to control it. So yeah, you can never truly own it yourself. So I just wanted to say those things to Wyatt. Thank you.
Kyle, what's going on? Kyle, are you there? Might be AFK.
Let's try this. Is this better? All
we
right,
can.
sorry,
I can hear you. Yeah.
I just spent the last 30 seconds giving the greatest life advice you'll ever hear. It's a one-time thing. I apologize, you guys. You're not going to hear it again. So, no, I'm mostly here just to learn and listen. I really appreciate all that Jordan says. One of the qualities of Jordan is he you don't have to guess what he's thinking. He doesn't hold it back, and so when he thinks that Dfinity's on the right path, he says so. He's the first to say congratulations when his wish list, when he can check off things off his wish list. He's also the first to say, hey, let's not stop there and let's move in. Let's tackle the next problem next. So I always appreciate that, and I always enjoy these kind of spaces that get more technical because it's sometimes I hear things differently than what I would hear at let's say at a Dfinity team meeting, and then it's a different perspective. But then also just the technical knowledge within this community is really impressive. So just say that, and if there's any, I guess one of the things too, just because from when I was listening about 20 minutes ago, there is a bit of me. This is Kyle speaking personally, not Kyle speaking as a Dfinity employee. I kind of see the evolution of any product as, sometimes you're building the foundation, sometimes you're building some tooling, and then other times you're looking for what that project actually needs to be. I think a protocol like the Internet Computer goes through cycles. I would say, I personally think that we're at the period of time where we really have to start finding product market fit. The Internet Computer is what it is today. It's something that I think we as an ICP community need to spend some time really thinking about, okay, who can leverage the protocol as it is today. Find those, because those end up becoming your foundation for what you can expand on. And then I would imagine, as we start finding that, I think quite frankly, we've found it with Bitcoin. I think that's pretty clear. And then I know within Dfinity, we're very confident that we have two great shots on goal with AI, with inference on chain or agentic AI, and then the self-writing internet, as Dom says. But who knows? We don't know. The only way to do is get it out in the market. So anyways, I say that's a part of there's a tech part of the conversation that goes on, but then there's the actual use case of the Internet Computer. And I'm always more focused on who's using it and for what reason. And then I always believe we should be building to those needs. Obviously, Jordan, having built one of the, built like a completely, Azul's onboarded so many devs and made the dev journey so easy. Jordan's a phenomenal customer of the Internet Computer, and so his opinion is highly respected. So that's my longer than I intended rambling, and I just appreciate, and I'll shut up and let the smarter people talk.
Yeah, appreciate that, Kyle. Yeah, Jordan, any thoughts on that? The whole idea, product market fit. I think, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that ICP is doing well right now. The chain fusion stuff, we're seeing that empower the Bitcoin builders. What else? There's stuff, Onikai putting LLMs on chain, doing inference on chain, Panda. There's a lot of interesting stuff that is happening and is possible with the current, the current network setup. And sometimes I do wonder if like the idea of branding this the Internet Computer Protocol, almost in a way like it's such a massive thing that you can't really like the challenge of specializing and going after like specific niches. It can be slightly difficult, right? And again, there, like Jordan says, it is slightly like a rigid network. There's flexibility at the subnet level, and perhaps again we're going to get a whole variety of subnets that do all sorts of things and open up more use cases, or perhaps we're going to get a like a separate network. I mean, I don't know, man, but it's yeah, I think in the product development timeline you really do have to start with like what is the need, right? And right now ICP really, it came out, it proved that it could do a lot of things. I mean, it's the only network that's really, regardless of what we might think about it and what we're talking about and how it could be better in all these different ways. I mean, it's done so much. It's been a pioneer in so many areas. But yeah, then we have to really look at it as what are the current capabilities and I guess future ceilings of this technology, and what use cases are those going to fill, and is how do we adapt as new technologies come out, right? And can we stay adaptable, right? And like with the whole ZK stuff, and I've been very curious because I was digging in Nexus, and it was really interesting because they have a white paper that they published on their website, but I was able to find two other white papers that weren't publicized where they were talking about, like, they were talking in terms of world computer, um, and doing all the world's computation on Nexus. And yeah, it got me thinking, and it was definitely above my technical pay grade. I couldn't understand it, but I don't know. We got Wyatt on stage. Wyatt, Jordan, Zane, do you guys have any thoughts about Nexus? I'm still trying to wrap my head around ZK and provers, and like I looked at they call it the whatever. I think it's like the Nexus VM or the ZK VM, whatever they're developing. Do you guys have thoughts about this? I know, again,
Yeah.
Dom pushed back very heavily, right, on ZK as being, due to cost and, latency, and yeah, but yeah, go ahead, Wyatt.
Yeah, I'm pretty good friends with actually most of that team. Like I met Daniel last year in Denver. Also, Jens was there as well. And we were all using similar like ZKP schemes at the time. There's something special called a folding scheme that are really cool because they allow for parallelism and also allow for like regular people to join a network because provers are relatively small. You can make them space efficient. But I think the story there is actually they were looking to make like a gigantic what would be a good way to say it? Everyone can participate in a blockchain type of thing. So if you listen to when Daniel speaks, sometimes he'll talk about like a project in the early 2000s where NASA had a bunch of people use their home computers to help calculate the locations of certain stars out of a massive data set. And it was like the largest cooperative like computer activity up to that date. I forget the name of the project, and I might be like misquoting some of the details, but that was the motivation. It was like, hey, can we get all these people together and kind of cooperate to have this gigantic computer running at once? So they were using folding scheme initially, which is what we're using. So we're like pretty aligned at that spot. But recently they moved off of that to something that's much quicker but takes much more memory. And with that, they're probably looking to become more like a EVM type prover L1. But what you can do now is you can actually use these, like say it's 1,000 people randomly located around the world. You can break up a computation, say it's an EVM computation, and have 1,000 people attack the problem at once. And with that, you get extreme speed. So you can eventually have like a real time ZK prover for the EVM, which a bunch of different teams are going after. It's not just Nexus. I would say SP1, Risk Zero. Most of the ZK people we hear about are all about scaling Ethereum. And I think that's just one version of it, is using a like infinite amount of computers or as many computers as you possibly get onto this network to kind of have this real-time EVM proving. And that's what I think they're referring to as like world computer, not really the same thing that I would say Dfinity is going for. Because it's really, I don't know if there's like a data layer. I'm not sure about the exact details underneath it, but it's more about just having participants join. By them switching from folding schemes to a more quick proving scheme, it actually kind of limits who can join now. So you do probably need a bigger machine. You probably can't do it in your browser as you were able to do a few months ago. Um, But really, I think a lot of the teams are in ZK, and when you hear ZK, you should think scaling, like scaling some form of like validity proofs or something like that. They're also used for like privacy and local verifiable computation, which is kind of a different thing. And the last two things you can actually use for any L1 or any L2. And with scalability, you really just focus on the limited L1s that don't have like the capabilities. So like Bitcoin's even one. There's like ZK for Bitcoin, which is kind of insane to me. To like do the check on it, you can wait like 3 to 4 months for like a Grout 16 proof to be not verified. But that's kind of what I would say their story is in terms of background. Obviously, they have Jens as well, who's on the Definity team before. He's one of the inventors of a cool scheme called Grout 16. It's actually the most used one. So having Jens go back into ZK, I think is really exciting as well. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean ZK is really interesting. It's very technical, and I think I would love at some point. Maybe this isn't the conversation, but to get one of you guys on to talk about ZK in layman's terms and break it down for the average person, so they could maybe start to wrap their heads around it and understand the implications. Because one of the things Jordan brought up was the idea that with ZK you don't need, what was it, Jordan? Was it you don't need replicated, or you don't need like BFT consensus?
You don't need to replicate computation to
Yeah.
get BFT consensus.
Yeah, so it essentially, like, the implications of that, Jordan, would be um, just more performance, essentially, correct? I mean, I'm sure there's like lots of implications, but
Well, yeah, assuming a lot of things, the dream, if it could work right, is you would shrink a 13 node subnet down to a 1 node subnet, maybe with a failover or two, just in case. And then you could use maybe a much lighter weight nodes to do consensus on incoming messages and have those extremely, extremely decentralized. Like let anybody participate almost, because all you have to do is order and agree on messages, and then you send the message off to the super powerful ZK proving thing, which itself could be parallelized, like Wyatt was saying, to actually do ZK proofs in real time. And part of why none of this is working at the moment, as much as we would like it to, in all computing and having a world computer that where you don't need replicated computation, is because it's like, I don't remember exactly, but like 10,000, 100,000, a million times slower, multiple orders of magnitude slower than like a regular CPU essentially. So that's the problem. But assuming, I don't know, 5-10 years from now, we'll be hitting the singularity probably in December of this year. So we could probably get a super powerful ZK machine from that in the next year or two. Probably not, but maybe 10 years from now. Imagine these technologies are scaling extremely well. Throw FHE in the mix for basically perfect confidential computing. Then it's like, wow, well, we don't need necessarily replicated computation or decentralization to achieve security of the computation itself. Neither do we need it in any way for confidentiality. All we need now is a lightweight consensus layer that is coordinating between very beefy ZK and FHE layers. And so
There's actually one thing I would say on that is the faster provers normally don't have privacy, even though they use ZK in their names, just so people are aware. Like if you see ZK VMs, most of them are not privacy preserving at all. They prioritize speed over everything else. So you have to give your data to a prover network that exists today. You will be exposing your data to a prover network.
Yeah, and like that's why I like to use the word validity proving generally, because it's not necessarily zero knowledge in the way people would think. But let's say we can combine a ZK VM with an FHE VM. There's already a fully homomorphic Ethereum virtual machine that exists by the Zama company, which is very cool. So, and ZK Wasm virtual machines, they almost didn't exist a couple years ago, and then I don't know how much I contributed, but I did start talking about it a lot. And there was like one little team in China or something building one, and now there's a handful. And so, there's one FHE VM at this moment, but who knows? There might be a handful in a few years, and then combine the technologies into one. And yeah, I don't know. I think we need a fundamental revolution in consensus technologies to be able to scale to the level that we want to. So, and then I want to just say, I really like the things Kyle was saying about me. That was really nice, Kyle. No. I think product market fit in the end is, I mean, it's almost like the absolute most important thing, right? Like, if there is no use for the technology, it doesn't really matter. I think people like Wyatt, to me, Dom, we probably tend to fall in love with technologies because we really like talking and thinking about it. So a lot of the things I'm saying about the protocol is just like, I think it should be this way. But also, I'm coming at it from the angle of, in my opinion, we haven't found super strong product market fit yet. Like, there's, in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and AI is even less. There's maybe starting to get some traction, right, in the Bitcoin ecosystem at least. And there's maybe a little twinkling of something possibly with the LLMs, but we'll see. So in my mind, why don't we have product market fit? That's what I'm trying to find out. And my contribution to that is not necessarily from a product angle, it's from the protocol angle. And I see these limitations and I see them as blockers to product market fit. So I just wanted to mention that.
Let's go Feroz. I think it was Feroz, Zane, Kyle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I mean, it's been a long conversation, but I had a friend back in the day and she was going to program for me something, and basically she straight away said, this isn't fully open source. And, she was involved with programming with Mozilla, and I can't remember what other software projects and stuff. But for her, it was a bit sus. And I think that for me, I said, well, how do people make money if it's open source? And then she kind of laughed at me. But so I was thinking, because I've worked for a couple of startups as well, and you got patents and then people steal your ideas and stuff like that. So how do you get the knowledge out there, or what this is, so you're not getting ripped off or da-di-da, but then without that knowledge getting stolen? That's what I was thinking about, because at the end of the day, it is a product. So yeah, we're all using it, but I still feel like I'm buying into the Internet Computer Protocol. Everyone's working on it. People are getting paid. So, I mean, that's just one of my thoughts of this thing. And then I was thinking about ZKPs. And then I was looking at, trying to remember the other blockchain. Before I fell in love with Internet Computer, I was looking at ZKPs to do what I wanted to do. And I was like, how do you prove something without exposing all the information, basically? And so then I was looking at the way to do that is each person would have their own canister anyway, da-di-da. But I just thought, I guess I mean, if it's software that's running on, a world computer, and ZKPs just should be evident, right? But yeah. Does that make sense, my brain? Too random.
Can you clarify your question simply?
Probably not. So the first one was in regards to open source. It's more of a pondering. How do you share the code and what's going on while also holding proprietary knowledge so it's not stolen? And I guess it's a legal thing and a money thing. The second thing is zero knowledge proofs, and considering it can be done on other blockchains, it should happen easily on Internet Computer. And I think you can do it if you've got canisters for each customer. I mean, I'm just thinking about my own thing, but it probably doesn't make sense. If you have knowledge that you don't want to share with everybody, it would be stored on separate canisters, but that's different, I guess, if it's more like identification, verification. So like in regards to, what's that ID verification thing where they're using AI, I mean, that must be ZKPs, right? Because obviously they're not sharing your login information. That's all zero knowledge proofs, isn't it? Does that make sense, the question?
Yeah, I think let's cover the open source one first. I'll let Jordan or Zane cover that one. So the question is, how do you I guess if you're going to make something open source, how do you retain or is it like make money on proprietary knowledge, monetize
Well,
it?
the reason that that's obviously not, I mean, what I'm guessing is the reason it's not open source is because they want to hold on to their IP. And, you know, yeah, so how do you hold on to it while also letting everybody know what's going on? And the thing is, with the network nervous system, everyone can vote on stuff. And for example, is it Jason, last MJS, you know, he's talking about how do we change things, and it's a good question because at the end of the day, if there's questions and then you want to vote on stuff, if he can code, but if he can't fundamentally see the code, how do you change it?
So I think
Statement in question.
in the world of open source, if you're going to do open source and you expect to make money from it, you have to change where the value lies, right? The idea is you're not capturing value. Basically, you're not charging for the code itself anymore. You need to essentially charge for something else. So in blockchain ecosystems, the value is not necessarily the code itself because anyone can fork it, right? But if you go look at Bitcoin and look at all of its forks, well, the main Bitcoin body, which has the most buy-in, which has the most people that talk about it, is Bitcoin itself. And it's the one that is worth the most because it's not necessarily the code that is valuable. It's actually the decentralized network of people, right? The value that arises from a network like this, we call an effect of the network, or a network effect, or an emergent property. And Bitcoin has various emergent properties that make it extremely valuable, such as the ability to send Bitcoin anywhere in the world and know for sure, basically, that that will not be hacked, assuming your front end and key is not hacked. So, and then you have the community itself, right? The Bitcoin community has a bunch of people that have a very common mindset, and people want to be associated with that community, and so they will purchase Bitcoin for a variety of reasons, which gives rise to the price of Bitcoin. So an ICP, the code, I think basically 100% of the code is open, as in available to read, at least most of the important code. But it is not necessarily open source in that it doesn't have a license that allows anybody to use it under any circumstances that they would like to choose to use it. So Zane and I think would say just make it completely open source, because the value doesn't lie necessarily in the code itself. The value is in the deployed network. It's in the community. It's in the ability for people to fork it as well. I think being able to fork is something valuable, and that would give businesses confidence to use it because they would know that they can always fork it or tweak it to their needs. But right now, you don't have that. So, I mean, it's of course it's a debate, but ICP is going against the grain and is unique here. Bitcoin, Ethereum, I assume Solana, they are 100% open source. They are not trying to capture value through necessarily patents or anything like that. Whereas ICP, unfortunately, in my opinion, is doing that.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought that you couldn't see all the code, but I probably interpreted that wrong. So you can see it all, but you just can't use it openly as such, like to build your own. But I mean, that makes no sense because it's an internet computer protocol and you're using the software. It means you can't on-sell it.
Yeah, I couldn't
What I mean?
ICP. I couldn't fork ICP, and I could fork a good chunk of ICP because most of the code is a normal open source license. But there's some of it that says, hey, you cannot just take this code and you have to take it and either use it on ICP or there's another license that is you could take it and you could use it on ICP or Ethereum. So I couldn't just fork ICP and call it Giordano and have my own blockchain and tweak it. That would be against the
You've
law.
thought about that, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I'm 100% aping into Giordano. All of it. Everything I got is going to Giordano.
You're just trying to build your own Giordano chain, aren't you?
Deploying capital, steady lads.
I like the branding with that, man. That's golden. Faro, and then you had a second question about ZK, correct? So ZK being able to be used on ICP or within canisters or something to that effect?
Pretty much. How does ZKPs work on ICP?
I think I can answer your question. If you want to prove something on ICP, most of this discussion we've been talking about using zero knowledge proofs to make the Internet Computer Protocol better itself, not to produce proofs for something else. If you want to produce,
I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
So can I just, when you were saying that stuff, because that was another topic, because so one of the things you said about Bitcoin, right? Decentralization, there's nodes all over the world, but then you're also talking about reducing nodes. But is what I'm hearing you're saying, if we use zero knowledge proofs, which I guess is like a mathematical equation or cryptography, you prove something and then you don't need to replicate it? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, basically you don't need to replicate computation to get security. You would have to replicate just you'd have to come to agreement on the transactions, but that's it. You wouldn't have to execute the transactions on all of the machines and make sure that everyone agrees, essentially. You could just agree what the transactions are, execute them, and then just verify the proof. That's what's nice.
And that would be solving your latency problem, right?
Well, it might be a foundational piece that eventually could solve the latency problem. Yes, that's the idea. I won't say I don't know for sure if it would, but I feel like it would be promising to look into over the next years. Like it's not, it'd be a long-term thing.
So it would be a node or some software running the zero knowledge proof thing, and then it's not replicated. Because you know how normally there's an oracle or something, and that does the ZKP, and it goes between the person and oracle and then the blockchain. I mean, in my understanding. So is it software on the internet computer or a separate node? Because you're talking about boundary nodes and stuff before. I'm not sure. That lets the messages in, as far as I understand. Would it be something similar where that's like the boundary node would be the ZKP node type of thing? I mean, this is all just hypothetical, but
yeah, it's a little too. But I don't know what a concrete design would look like. But I imagine you might have the same boundary nodes as before. They would basically send messages to the equivalent of a subnet, but the subnets would be much more decentralized, and the hardware would be much less, I guess, beefy and expensive because all they're doing is coming to consensus. And then you would somehow, somewhere, I don't know if you would consider it in the protocol or outside of the protocol, you could even have a market for this. The cool thing is, once you come to consensus on the transactions going into the ZK prover, it doesn't matter where you run the ZK prover. You could literally run it. We can run it from your house. We don't have to trust you. As long as you produce the proof, then we're good to go. We can just verify the proof and use the consensus on transactions and go. So that's what's cool is we could possibly get rid of the rigid subnet structure for the computation itself. You still want to replicate data. So there's some problems, right? Like if you really want a cloud environment, you need to have a nice heap size. You need to have a bunch of data storage. So, but I'm just thinking we could re-architect it, or someone could, right? It doesn't have to be ICP. It could be some other protocol. They could possibly simplify things once we have cheap enough and scalable enough zero knowledge proving capabilities.
But I mean,
Yeah.
Dom basically said that was impossible, correct? I mean, in my reading of what he was saying, he's like, it's not even remotely viable.
I would contend with that. I don't think that's true. It could be true. I just at this moment I do not. I guess I don't have enough evidence or experience to convince myself that what he said in that particular case is the absolute truth on the matter.
Does would quantum computing bolster like you said, um, like a ZK prover machine in any way? I imagine it would.
Oh,
I mean, again, this is way above my pay grade, but would quantum help with all of this?
oh, did I think Wyatt left? I actually don't know, but quantum is very good for things. I mean, my limited understanding, right? Because it's a new computing paradigm, and not many of us have dived into it yet. But the idea is you have many different states, different possible states, and the quantum hardware is able to contain those essentially. That's why it will break hashing. My very basic understanding is it'll break hashing because how do you break a hash? Well, you brute force, right? You generate as many hashes as you can to try to find the one, the input text that is the key. Well, with a quantum computer, you could trivially do who knows how many at a time, right? Millions or billions of those at a time. So could that possibly help you with ZK proving, where you split up the computation into many different pieces in the computer? I don't know. I asked Grok or someone I said some other the other day, but I don't remember.
So before what you were saying, and then I'll talk about the quantum thing, because so basically the idea of world computer is it's distributed hardware and software, right? So I get you want to make it faster and then have the zero knowledge proof thing set up, but at the end of the day, isn't it so that everyone's able to access the hardware and software in secure places, and it's all distributed? Does that make sense? It's a statement and a question. Sorry, does that make sense?
What we want is security. So we want high levels of integrity, confidentiality, and availability. We want everyone to be able to access it, and we want it to be very secure. We only want authorized transactions to go through. Only I am authorized to transact with my balance, and only you are authorized to transact with your balance. Things like that.
No, but what I'm saying is, rather than it just being a transaction, if you're running software on it, like a full program, it has to run on something. So it's not just transaction based. So then you still need that software to run on a node. But are you just saying the transactions between the person or the customer and that software running on a node would be the ZKP?
I'm saying the transactions would go to a decentralized network similar to what we have, some kind of Ethereum or ICP subnet thing, and they would still come to consensus on the transactions. So that part is still decentralized. That part is still, tamper-proof. Whatever's coming in, my signature that says I want to send you some money, or that says, I want to update this email or whatever, right? That message still has consensus. But then when you actually go to execute it, to change the state, change something in memory or change something on disk, that just happens on, it doesn't have to happen in a replicated subnet. It can happen on one machine in a data center that's still secure and excellent, but it doesn't have to communicate with 12 other machines and do multiple rounds of communication for that. It can just execute the transaction as fast as it can and generate the proof. And then it would send the proof basically back to this decentralized.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. The quantum thing, I mean, just me breaking it down. Basically, you've got binary zeros and ones, two possibilities. Quantum, it has another vector, so you just have a random tangent going out in. There's multiple possibilities. So when you have multiple possibilities, so for example, Bitcoin, it works on solving a problem. So it's run on a classical computer. If it's quantum, it can work faster because there's more possibilities. So I see quantum, but I don't get it. Just means faster and more possibilities. That's what quantum is in my head, anyway.
Yeah, I think we need to look up. Someone with more knowledge would need to step in, or we can all ask our LLMs later and post the proof of that. But I don't know the answer, and it would be really cool if it were the case. And I think there's a possibility that quantum hardware could speed up ZK, but I don't know.
Trevor, you've been quiet. Do you have anything?
I kind of have a question, just a basic question. So, kind of going back to DevOps, right? Whereas Google has Firebase, AWS has Amplify. What is ICP's version of kind of DevOps? Are we considering that kind of caffeine's job point, or is there a specific area that we would consider a pinpoint for DevOps?
Yeah, there's Caffeine AI, which is not launched yet, as far as I know. There's ICP Ninja, which I haven't used, but I've heard really good things about. ICP.ninja, I believe you can just go there. And then there's the Cyclops team, who's working on things like this. So that protocol itself does not have an abstraction like this built on top of it. Well, someone would have to build it, either Dfinity or some other team. So honestly, I think it's a great, I think it's a great product that someone needs to build, and there are a couple teams building. That makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, and then there's also Juno build as well.
And I apologize for being quiet, Zen. I was in the middle of cooking dinner, but I am here and listening.
No, you're fine. I appreciate the co-host. This was all put together kind of last minute. I want to check in really quick with Jordan and Zane. How you guys doing on time?
Yeah, I should probably go, but I mean, if people have more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Let's I'm going to open it up to the audience one last time. Maybe max will take 3 questions, but if anybody wants to come up right now and ask two of the big brains in this community a question about ICP, just request and we'll get you up here. This is a rare opportunity, man. These devs do not come out. They are locked in most of the time, so it's definitely a good opportunity if you want to get an expert opinion on something. Okay, we got Troy coming up. Troy, go ahead. You're good, man. Go ahead.
Hi. My question is transaction limit. I'm not sure who was speaking, but they were talking about that we're going to have some limitations on transactions that adapt can do. And I think you said 500 per second or something like that. Yeah, somebody was saying that was talking about how Twitter couldn't scale on ICP in its current form.
Yeah, that was me. So in regards to the IC, there are two kinds of limitations. So there is consensus bound and there is execution bound. Consensus bound means the number of transactions that can fit into a single block. And execution bound is essentially the computation of said transactions. Usually speaking, the IC does pretty good with the execution, and like recently it became an issue with Bob and all the mining stuff. But most of the times, and especially for certain kinds of applications like exchanges, ledgers, or perhaps even stuff like a social network, where the transaction themselves are quite simple. Say you want to add a like to a post on a social media, or you want to do a swap between two tokens, the execution itself is really simple. But the limitation that will come in is the number of transactions that can fit into a block. So if you have more than 500 users, you will run into issues. And the solution for that is, first of all, you have to scale using multiple canisters, so at least two for a single subnet, and then you have to go on multiple subnets. But even that doesn't really work well, because in computing there is data contention. So for instance, like you can only split your state so many times to optimize processing, because at some point you will have to fetch state, two separate units of state from different places. So in the IC, that will be different subnets, and that comes with a lot of latency first, and is still like the transaction might fail, because if one of the subnets is backed up, the transaction might be rejected. So that adds again to the latency. And for exchanges, this is a really big problem, because you can only split them so much, because the basic unity, in my opinion, of an exchange is how is it called? Like the single the single trade, so like BTC USDT. So each trading pair is the smallest you can separate the state, because if you go like even more than that, you will always run into data contention, and the optimization you get from it is countered by the inherent latency of the transaction. So let's say you have a subnet which only handles BTC USDT trading pair. You are limited to 1K transactions per second, which is not that much, because big trading pairs like BTC USDT do way more than that on centralized exchanges. And if we want to use DIC to replace that kind of infrastructure, we need more scalability. So I hope that was not too technical, and it was clear. And if you have any doubts, just let me know.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question if you don't mind saying.
Sure.
Um, so okay, so we're actually gonna deploy our DApp next week just to try it out for alpha testing, and it has 11 canisters. We have all the user data, like the profiles, on one canister. We didn't use like one canister per user like I understand OpenChat did. But yeah, I wonder. You said 500 users. I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to like. I have no idea what's gonna happen actually. So it's gonna be interesting. But do you have any advice about? Oh, but I guess my question is, I'm assuming that I can put all the canisters. They're gonna be on the same subnet, and that would be a good thing, right? So they can communicate with less latency, I guess? Or I have no idea what I'm talking about. What's your
No,
opinion?
that's right. So firstly, it's not 500 user in general, but submitting transactions at the same time. So let's say there is a new token on pump.fun and everybody wants to trade it. That would be a situation where the bottleneck happens. But like if they are interacting with the platform um, in a spread way, so not everybody at the same time, you won't have any issues. And in my opinion, for small dApps, to start out, um, like a single canister, or in general or a single subnet architecture is better. It's easier, especially the single canister one, to reason about. um, Many projects, even big ones on the IC, use this approach. So I don't think it will be a problem for you. But since we're talking about internet computer and building like the future internet, uh, this is not enough. It doesn't cut it. So when I speak about this, it's always in relation of what the IC, what the vision of the IC is, rather than the use cases and the type of load we have right now.
Cool. Thanks for answering my questions.
No problem, man. Anytime.
Let's go Trevor and then Jay Marco.
Hey, real quick, I am gonna hop off here in a bit, but I did want to get one question out to Jordan because I have been exploring WebSockets a little bit recently, especially utilizing them as far as calling some Web 2 agents. Now, I did notice for the WebSockets, sometimes the latency does drop, and it drops dramatically. Is there a way to improve latency, or is that something that it is possible in the future?
So I would really have to look into the architecture of the WebSockets. That was a separate team. That wasn't us actually.
Gotcha. Okay, I
So
thought that was you. I'm
I
sorry.
just yeah, I wanted that a long time ago, so I came up in the forums and we would like to implement it in ASIL eventually, but I know they use some kind of proxy, some kind of off-chain system combined with something on the canister itself. So anything that's off-chain, I assume you could optimize that a lot. Anything that has to go through the canister's consensus will not be able to be optimized. So if you're pushing a message from the canister to the client, you're going to be running into internet computer constraints, I imagine. But yeah, I'd have to look into it more.
Gotcha. I appreciate it.
Jay Marco, what's going on?
Nothing much. I have a question for Jordan. Jordan, I feel like I saw you make a tweet a little while ago saying that you were working with some team on a project that you were super excited about, and it was a notable team that we might have heard of or something like that. I feel like I didn't hear any follow-up on that project. Are you still working on that project, or did it
Yeah,
fall through, or yeah?
I was just thinking about that like a couple seconds ago. I haven't heard from them in a while, so I basically need to email them. But it was very exciting. I don't want to say publicly still what it is, but I'll email them like right now.
Any hint on it at all? You don't have to say exactly, but you give us a.
I mean, just a hint. It was just it was like a very traditional company doing like they weren't like blockchain first or anything, and they really wanted to find an actual like Web3 solution, and ICP was like, oh wow, we could host exactly what we want. And I met with their team multiple times, and then it seemed like they got the okay to do what they needed to do, and then I haven't heard since, so I need to reach out to them.
Now, do you think the issues that you were bringing up here might impact a project like that or not?
Well, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like literally like a minute ago, I was like, ooh, like what issue did they hit? Was it uploading the data? Was that too slow? Blah blah blah. So I don't know. Yeah, I will reach out to them.
Cool. Thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, and thank you guys, both of you, for taking the time today to just come up here and have this discussion, take questions, just kick it back and forth. I think before we sign off here, I'd love to end on a high note and also a practical note. So I guess on the high note side, I'd love to just get from both Jordan and Zane um, a couple of comments on currently what are some things that ICP is excelling at and something that you're excited about, that you find compelling or interesting, or something that you're looking forward to. And then on the practical side, I just would love to hear uh, what, you know, fundamentally in terms of next steps or just practically speaking, uh, you would like to see happen, or is, something the community can do to uh, improve, I guess, just the working relationship around the protocol, how things, how ideas get passed around, how things get developed. Just if there's anything practical that isn't just pie in the sky, or because there's so much information that was thrown out in this space. I mean, in terms of actually now moving forward day to day next steps. So yeah, like if we could end on a bit of a high note, and then also maybe just cover some practical steps. I'll let Jordan go, and then we'll pass it to Zane, and then we'll tie a bow in this space.
Yeah, I think Kyle Langham mentioned it before. The the one main area of product market fit is in the Bitcoin community because of ICP's threshold ECDSA capabilities, which basically lets ICP be a very flexible multi-sig / multi-party computation protocol, essentially. So there are multiple teams working with ICP on Bitcoin, and Bob's has had some recent success. The other ones, I don't know exactly how successful they are, but in my mind, that's probably the most exciting thing. Is there's an actual community outside of ICP that have been looking for technical solutions, and I don't know how many, but a good chunk, a good handful, have actually chosen ICP. That's really excellent validation. So that's encouraging. And not only have they chosen ICP, one of them in particular, Taproot, or sorry, Tap Protocol, they're using Azel itself, TypeScript, JavaScript, our project on ICP to do their Bitcoin stuff. So that's exciting. And then I'd say a concrete next step for the community. If you agree with any of the things that I would like to change, I think number one for me is getting the instruction limit lifted. What helps is if other people research it, or if you're a developer, if you experience it, if you can, I guess, pile on to the conversation and say, hey, I have this problem too, or hey, I also think this should be changed. I actually have a thread in the forum called like, I just hit the instruction limit. So if you ever hit the instruction limit, I would go there and say that you hit it. And if you haven't hit it, but you, I guess, think it would be a great idea to lift it because of some software that you would like to be running, you should go say it. Because I think Dfinity would really like to hear concrete use cases, and they want to know the best way to spend their time, which I have my opinion of what the best use of time would be, but so do many other people. So if we could just get that lifted, that's probably my number one priority at the moment.
And before we go to Zane, I mean, I just want to quickly, because I think the standard way of having these conversations is through working groups. And there's also a bit of like, again, in just the social arena on Twitter and in the forums, people can make noise. But is there a working group where this is coming up regularly?
Yeah, I guess so. The scalability and performance working group is probably the best place to bring it up. And I brought it up multiple times in there. Yeah, it's not like they're not working to lift the limits, but what I want is a complete removal of the limits. So sure, there's that working group. You can find the working groups at the forum. And then I have a post that's all about the instruction limit. You could also go there.
Great. And
I
then
have
just, yeah, go for it.
Can I make a comment on what Jordan just said? So when Jordan, when you're just talking about product market fit and some of the success ICP has been having lately with Web3 teams building on ICP, don't you think that's probably the area that ICP should be focusing on most right now? Being a development platform for Web3 projects. Focus on building tools that developers building on Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum and Solana, and give them tools that they would need to build applications that they're trying to build, and that's where the product market fit would come in the near term at first. I know
Probably.
your vision is to for ICP to be a decentralized cloud that could replace all computation and AWS and computation in general. But don't you think that the more realistic thing could be, okay, the product market fit is going to come from being a very useful Web3 cloud platform that all Web3 teams will want to build on simply because it provides the most tools that they would need to build Web3 application. Kind of like Chainlink. That's what Chainlink does, right? They build a bunch of products that Web3 dexes and things use that they need to create those applications. The ICP could be a more extended version of that, and that's where the product market probably realistically would come at first.
Yep, I agree. But the limitations I bring up, like the instruction, they should help that use case because, for example, you're building in TypeScript, you can do threshold transaction. You want to use the Bitcoin libraries, right? You want to pull npm install Bitcoin JS lib or whatever. These limitations, I think, need to be lifted even for those use cases. So, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Actually, I might have some insight on that because I've been involved with the ICP hub of my country ever since it wasn't even an official hub. So I've participated in many crypto conferences and spoken to people from all kinds of places. So like normies, devs, investors, and so on. And usually speaking, so my job was to introduce them to the IC, explain what it does, and like I most of the time get positive feedback on it. Like everybody likes it, except maybe like the hardest maximalist who are just there to essentially say their chain is better than yours. But usually people are into it. But the more technical guys usually start having issues with the protocol when we speak about the node count and how the nodes are run, because the discussion usually ends up there because they want to know because the initial pitch is so good, it's like there has to be a catch. And so they start asking, okay, how do I run a node? And do I need to stake, or is the DAO centralized, and so on. And like I explain why certain things are have been done like this, but then just to uh, get a vibe check from them, I say, okay, but what if we had subnets that are permissionless with higher node count, and instantly they're like, yeah, then I will be convinced. I love to build on it. So I think this is one of the main problems we have. The deterministic decentralization is a hard sell for the overall ecosystem because it's an unproven system. It's a unique system, and people, rightfully so, maybe they don't fully trust it. So if we had more flexibility in the network structure, we might be able to satisfy those who need max performance and those who don't really care that much about performance but are decentralization first. I think that's like the biggest thing that will help attract the crypto crowd.
But my thing about that is though, what how is this any different than Chainlink? Chainlink dons their decentralized Oracle networks. It's essentially deterministic decentralization. They don't have an open network where any node can come in and be part of their Oracle network. It's basically they choose the nodes from operators that they know, and it's a node. They're KYC'd, and I think that their dons actually are the same size as a standard ICP subnet. It's like 13 to 32 nodes or something like that, and they accept that. All the dexes and all the DeFi stuff they all use Chainlink oracles. So why do they accept that as perfectly decentralized, or not perfect, but decentralized enough? but somehow the ICP subnets are different. I never understood that, to be honest.
I do agree. So it doesn't really matter, but I think that Chainlink does some kind of use of TEs. So maybe it makes their security guarantees a bit better. But in general, I think it comes down to historical reasons. Chainlink is more integrated into the ecosystem. So, like, I don't know,
Yeah,
it has a better reputation overall because when it
right.
launched, it didn't say, okay, Chainlink is the best chain ever. It's going to replace Ethereum, but it immediately started with saying, okay, we are here to empower Ethereum. So people essentially accepted it as a new thing, while ICP, the old approach to marketing was more aggressive, let's say. Um, and so it's hard to change people's mind, especially in crypto, which is very tribal and irrational at times. So yeah, that might not help our cause.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really just perception because from a technical standpoint, there's in the decentralization step, there's no difference between Chainlink and ICP in terms of the Oracle networks or the subnets.
The
Yeah, I
thing
think
though
that's what
is
you said.
ICP is also bigger than Chainlink in what it wants to do. So we might be able to sell IC as a Oracle network, even though it might be a bit redundant. But the IC is much more. So it'd be a waste to say, okay, we are kind of the same as Chainlink in terms of security guarantees. So use us instead of them. Uh, I wish the IC was used more as a layer one, because one of the best thing it has, and it was on my list for the high notes, is the dev experience. In my opinion, it's much nicer to develop on compared to other chains. Um, the learning curve is less steep, and also it's easier to migrate your know-how and skill set from Web 2 to the IC. So yeah.
Well, that kind of might be a perception thing because I always felt like um, the best case scenario for ICP is it's actually the platform that people develop on, and then they just use the other blockchains in the background as like token databases, and that's it. Basically, what Odin Fund is like. That's my vision of what the ICP is supposed to be. It's like you build the application, it's actually running on ICP, and then you're just using CK tokens in the background or whatever. Um, so I think that's a big storyline with Odin Fund because I think that's what the best case scenario of ICP is supposed to look like. Um, so I don't think it's all bad. I think there is some traction happening. Um, so hopefully more comes. Um, but yeah, I just really want to bring up that Web3 cloud narrative that even if ICP is not perfectly scalable to replace AWS right now or anytime soon, I think it can still have a lot of success just simply being a Web3 cloud platform. That's more powerful than Chainlink, for example, which by the way has a lot of product market fit. So we know this type of thing can have really good product market fit.
Yeah, I agree. And regarding the audience stuff, it is some nice traction, but at the same time, I see there is still a bit of skepticism from the BDC community, and I've read many comments saying, "Oh yeah, that's good for now, but there is this other solution that's more Bitcoin aligned that's coming up. So in the future, maybe we'll use that instead."
I,
Um,
I don't
and
know if I believe. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
me
I don't know if
neither.
I believe it.
Me neither. But just to say that the perception has not fully shifted. It's in the process, and perhaps could help what could help us achieve this PMF is empower even more the chain fusion stuff, because there is something else that is not talked about that much, and that is the limitation for um, transactions, for threshold transactions, which is 1.5 a second, which is not that much. And since the throughput is limited, that means also the cost has to be higher. Otherwise, the subnets will never be able to be deflationary. So I love to see if that is what we want to focus on, then work has to happen there, which, as far as I know, is not scheduled to happen, at least for this year. So yeah, even in that sense, Jordan was talking about the structural limit, but there is also this other limitation that should be lifted. And there were talks years ago. I think Jans was still a definitive back then about increasing by orders of magnitude the capability of threshold signing.
Yeah, but yeah, in general, yeah, in general, I feel like the main thing that Dfinity and the ICP community should be focused on is um, that Web3 cloud narrative. And I think the most important way to get there, I think the main thing that would separate ICP from everything else is developer experience and developer tools. Like to just just be a platform that has everything that you would need to build a complete Web3 application. And by having all these tools and uh, all those things, people will want to develop on it because it's just simply the easiest way to build a Web3 application. Because that's basically what I think Odin Fund is. Like the reason why Bob was able to build that before any other Bitcoin team was able to is because he had all those tools. He had Omnity network building those specific runes integration and all that complicated stuff. And then and then he also had HTTP outcalls and chain fusion and CK tokens all built out. So by leveraging ICP, he was able to beat out all those other teams that I'm sure are trying to build a pump fund Bitcoin thing. But he was able to beat them out just simply because ICP was had the most tools for him to build that application the fastest. So that's what I think the focus should be. I know that wasn't necessarily the original pitch of ICP. Is supposed to beat AWS and all that stuff, but sometimes you have to pivot the product market fit. Bitcoin originally said it was supposed to be a peer to peer cash thing, and it failed at that. It wasn't scalable enough, so they pivoted to store value, and that worked out for them. So yeah, that's where I think ICP is. That I think that's where it's looking like the product market fit should be. So yeah, I just want to say that to encourage people. Like I don't think it's all bleak and it's over. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel
Oh
with
yeah,
this
yeah,
Web3 stuff.
absolutely. The reason I'm here is because I like the project and I think it has a lot of potential. If I thought otherwise, I would just not care about it. So usually I'm the most critical of the stuff I like because that's usually what I know best. And if there is something I don't like, I just ignore it because I don't want to waste my time hating it. Um, so yeah, that's just where I'm coming from. It's passion and love of the project. I personally met many Dfinity engineers, and I know they're very capable people, and they're also very passionate about their work. I just think, and I know I'm not the only one in this camp, that perhaps if the priorities were a bit different, we might have more success. And maybe even if let's say the marketing or how we approach the broader community was done a bit differently, we might be able to fit in and attract more devs and get them hooked on the IC capabilities.
Exactly.
Trev, go ahead.
So I just wanted to make a comment real quick because hearing that we're still discussing trying to find product market fit when we're 4 years into a 20-year roadmap as an investor is kind of concerning, right? We should already have an understanding of our product market fit currently. And I don't know if I'm the only one who feels this way, but I feel like we shouldn't be struggling with a product market fit currently?
I hear you on that, but sometimes it that's how it happens. But for example, I was just listening to a podcast with this guy named Jonathan Ross, who's the CEO of Grok, the AI chip company, the one that makes the AI inference chips. And he was saying that he started developing those Grok chips in 2016. He originally uh, created the TPU at Google, and then he realized that this was going to be a market for this thing big time in the future, and he started developing all the way back in 2016. And then he said that there was zero product market fit for that chip until just a year ago or a year or two ago when the chat GPT moment happened. So that was something like 6 7 years where you're saying he had zero product market fit. His company almost went bankrupt a couple times. The board almost kicked him out and tried to shut the company down. Like he was saying they had zero product market fit at all, and it was held the whole time in 6 7 years. And then suddenly all the product market fit came 1 year just suddenly, and now all their chips are sold out and they're making billions of dollars and all this stuff. So not necessarily saying that we shouldn't be a discussion on product market fit and a concern after 4 years, but sometimes it just takes a while, I think. And just because it hasn't come within 4 years, that it means that there's no merit to this technology.
That's true, but at the same time, I think part of the issue stems down from the fact there is a lack of focus on a particular PMF. So these guys in 2017 said, okay, this is going to be the future. That's what I'm going to build. And he stuck to it until it worked. What I see sometime from the leadership at Definity is chasing trends rather than setting them or focusing on something in particular they truly believe in. And that usually doesn't really work out well, especially when you have to build out those features, maintain them, improve them. Um, it causes like a lack of focus internally that is reflected ultimately on the quality of set features. Again, if Definity said, okay, we're gonna go fully on threshold stuff, then perhaps by now we would have way more integrations, more performant and cheaper threshold signing, and so on. But like recently, there has been this shift to AI because like that's the hot stuff right now. So perhaps that has also played a role. Like initially, Definity was supposed to be, when the chain was still called Definity, it was supposed to be Ethereum done right. Then it became the AWS killer. Then there was the SNS focus. Then the chain key focus, and now it's split between chain key and AI. And
Yeah,
it
I
is
mean,
worsened. Sorry, but it is worsened by the fact that not only they shift the focus at the protocol level, but also since there is not that much traction in the ecosystem, they try to create it themselves, spreading the resources even thinner. Because now not only they have to build new features, but also kind of build out the infrastructure and the app layer, which in my opinion is not that good of a thing for multiple reasons.
Yeah, yeah, that I guess that's true, but I kind of feel like all the stuff that they develop on the roadmap, for the most part, furthers all of their ventures into all different areas that they're trying to look for product market fit. Like all the stuff in their roadmap, I think helps with being a Web3 cloud that can help create dApps for every ecosystem. So I don't feel too bad about that. I also want to point out that there has been a lot of growth in terms of the metrics in ICP in the last year to 6 months. What's the burn rate up by in the last 6 months? Like 10,000% or something like that. So it's not zero product market fit that ICP has. Like if you go to Token Terminal, ICP is actually making top five in blockchains and revenue. It's way orders of magnitude behind the big one, Solana and Ethereum stuff, but it's actually ahead of a lot of other stuff. Like there's a lot of other stuff that really don't have any product market fit in terms of revenue. Yeah, I think we should acknowledge that there has been some real growth that we've been seeing in
But if
key
you look at
metrics.
the cause of the growth, like it's not real use cases. It's
Well,
some kind of DeFi gambling, which is fine. I'm a fan of that. But again, it shows that the greatest success we had in the past year was not the PMF that Dfinity envisions for the chain. And
yeah,
like my core philosophy is that a system that maximize the extensibility will always win over a system that maximizes usability, because you cannot predict what the users will find useful in the future. So what you should do instead is say, okay, I want to empower the builders and have them go crazy, build whatever they want, because whatever I come up with, which I might think it's really cool, they might do 10 times more, 10 times better. Maybe a lot of it will fail, but some of it will succeed and it will be way better than whatever they came up initially. I mean, this is what makes the internet great. It was born as a way to just share information between universities, and now there is all this stuff going on. And whoever built it uh, could have never imagined all the potential use cases that have been created. And that's the same for ICP. Who would have thought about Bob? Somebody in the community made it, and it was a success. So who knows how many other things are lying there, but are still not like really possible due to some of the limitations.
Yeah,
right. I mean, yeah.
I did want to touch that was one project that basically did 80% of the network growth, right? The burn rate. And that was at the cost of investors personally putting their ICP into a furnace for an altcoin. So that wasn't real world use case or real utility to the network. It was a way to increase network growth because we demanded it as investors, right? Like investors demanded that, but that wasn't an actual utility to network growth, in my eyes, at least.
Well, I think it is. I mean, Bob to me is DeFi. It's a form of DeFi in my opinion. That's just completely unique, and that hasn't you couldn't build on any other chain, right? Like right? It's like a simulation of Bitcoin, and people invest in it either through buying the token or mining it. So to me, it's in that's just the way that they're speculating on the making money off in the token price going up. But to me, that's just like a new form of DeFi. So I look at Bob as that is very interesting and useful use of the protocol. That was unexpected, like Zane was saying. So I think that's another one that's very encouraging. That somebody outside of Definity created this thing that's carrying the platform right now, and it was
Yeah.
completely unexpected. And I think it's real. I know some people say, well, it's a meme coin, but I mean, to me, it's DeFi. So if you're gonna say, that if that's not real, then you have to say all that stuff on Ethereum is not real. But because you're just speculating on a certain construction of a token, and it's just new and completely different. So
I
I
think
think it's a positive.
the degen aspect is what is missing from the IC, and Bob adds to that. We need more of it, because I mean it's part of the culture. It's in a way, like it or not, part of crypto. So we should welcome that. Not only because it's good for the network, in terms of publicity, metrics, but it also helped showcase some limitations of the protocol and changes. Many changes have been made to the scheduler as a result of Bob mining. So again, that is a proof that there are many bottlenecks still existing in the network, but Dfinity has this kind of attitude that we solved scalability. That is, we figured out that problem, so we should focus on something else. But the truth is, as soon as we start getting more traction and more users and more applications, they will come up, and I don't want them to stop us getting traction and limit our potential growth. I want that to be taken care of as soon as possible. So whenever that happens, we're ready to go. We won't have downtimes or any kind of issues like Solana does. So that's why I talk about it, and I want it to be talked about. So maybe the foundation can look into it sooner rather than later when it's too late.
What if the Neuron Fund was used through a proposal to reward the top 3 projects that burn cycles? And every month, whoever are the top 3 get the rewards. And it creates a free market to be a top 3 project.
I don't think so. Then, I mean, I'm for the freedom of trying anything, and I wasn't really into Bob when it came out, and I'm still not into Bob because it reminds me of a similar project that came across EOS when I was back in EOS, just kind of a project that clogged up the system. And but I don't know. I think giving away neuron funds for that, I guess it's a pretty good off the cuff idea, but I don't know. I think it could be spent better places.
Keep in mind that Neurons Fund is stakers rewards essentially. So I don't think it's fair to give them out to top projects. I mean, whoever created Bob has likely already made some profit off of it, unless he sold all his stock in the beginning. But usually, if you have a lot of burn rate, it means you have a lot of usage, a lot of users. So you should already have the means to monetize your applications.
So I didn't mean the project, the devs. I mean the token holders of the project.
Yeah, I still don't know. It's also a very specific kind of project because it assumes there are token holders, and for what the IC is, which is a crypto cloud, that is not necessarily true. But yeah, generally speaking, not a fan of it. As far as I know, Jordan had some ideas a few time ago on how like developers can monetize, but that was more for like infrastructure stuff. So like if you build a library that is used a lot, then you receive some cycles from each canister that uses it. It's a bit different, but I think it probably cover a bit of what you said.
We need to crowdfund a better idea than the way the Neuron Fund is being used today.
If it were up to me, I'd either get rid of it because it is evident at this point that it has been gamed, or if it has to still be a thing, I would make it a thing that isn't gate capped to the SNS only, which in my opinion gives a huge and fair advantage to the SNS platform versus any potential contestants that are not there because it's impossible to compete, and make it so that it can be leverage outside of it. So you have these staked funds that can be donated to other neurons.
Zane, could I jump in? I also want to mention Jordan has got to sign off here pretty quickly. So at a certain point, we'll let Jordan get a few final words in. But um, I put out a huge post on the NF specifically, and I realize it's a voluntary system. But the one thing for me that this hinges on is how much of the neuron fund is coming from Definity neuron contributions. Because if it's the case, and I would suspect that it's the case, that and I don't think this can be verified. It's what I wanted to ask you is I don't think we can verify if a lot of money is coming from certain Definity neurons and going towards the neuron fund. But the thing is, if that was the case, that Definity was funding the large majority of what exists, like the money in the neuron fund, um, I would love to see it be a more like just a grant, like literally almost a protocol funded treasury. And in fact, they were floating the idea of there's been a lot of interesting ideas floated around maturity, right? Like with governance incentives for neurons, right? To if you're following a neuron, right, paying a percentage of your maturity to that neuron. But like I love the idea of there being a like a perpetually self-funding treasury that anybody at any time, an SNS, an individual, a for-profit, a nonprofit, can essentially write up a grant proposal, right, and submit it to the NNS, right? It's a decentralized grant proposal, and this could be for-profit work, for not-for-profit work. Like it's become such a flexible system, and it's something where the request for funding can be done at a microscopic level. So instead of raising 100,000 ICP for a 3-year roadmap for a startup, you could say, hey, we're a startup, we want to validate our product, we want to spend 500 ICP to do this one, build out this one feature and do this one marketing campaign and see if it works, right? And then it adds in all of these interesting mechanics where it's like if you're a team and you get a grant, right, a small grant, and you succeed, you might get a bigger one, right? um I don't know, man, but like bottom line, what I was wondering is, do we have any data on how much of the neuron fund comes from Definity, like how much of those contributions? Because I just can't imagine most people would be volunteering their maturity to the neuron fund at this point.
So if there is any data regarding the distribution for the neuron fund, I'm not aware of it. Maybe this is a place where Kyle could have stepped in and filled in with some information on his side. I don't think I don't think there is like a lot of it is coming from Definity themselves, but perhaps some investors who have just left their tokens there, taking their rewards, and left the check mark on the Neuron Fund participation. But again, this is just an hypothesis. I have no data to back this up. But I do agree that there are better ways it could be used, and perhaps we could do a podcast about it. Overall, I just think its current use, it's not only bad for the stakers themselves because they're getting abused, uh, but also for the ecosystem as a whole, because Definity has created this launchpad that has essentially been the only one, because it's really hard to compete in an ecosystem that has very low liquidity, launching an alternative to the only launchpad that has some liquidity thanks to the Neuron Fund. And this goes back to the focusing on the protocol rather than other stuff, not only because, well, you get less protocol feature, but also because you risk front running the builders in the community, making it impossible or harder to create a product. Maybe there are some people who were building it or other products that Definity decided to build and just gave up on it because they were like, no way I'm going to compete with the foundation. And as you said, like you mentioned the example of, oh, it would be really cool if we could just give this money to a guy who wants to build an MVP. So he doesn't have a full scale application. He doesn't want to go full on with decentralization. Maybe you just want to test it out, see if there is interest in the market. And that is not possible right now. Again, this is an idea you had. Maybe there are many other people with other great ideas that are not being enabled by the foundation.
Well, I think that the SNS shouldn't even be used as a fundraising thing in the first place. I think that's a mistake from the beginning. Um, I think that this SNS should just be used to decentralize your project after it already is successful and it already has product market fit.
Hey, Jay Marco, real quick. I just Jordan is Jordan. I think needs to get going. I just want to open up a space for Jordan for you to give final words. I want to thank you so much for coming on, answering questions. I hope we can do this again at some point and maybe go in on a specific topic or get involved in the working groups. I hope more people will consider tuning into the scalability working groups and the DAI working groups and just listening in and learning more. But yeah, Jordan, final words, and then please get going and get, I know you have stuff to do.
Yeah, thank you. This space was so excellent. It was amazing. I feel like this is the exact kind of just open civil conversation that we need to have. I mean, we should talk about the problems. We should also talk about the good things. It's great. And today we focused on, I guess, the things that I discussed, world computer and architectures, but there's so many topics that people want to discuss. And so it makes a sense to keep doing a lot of these. So I'm glad I was able to come.
Thanks, man. And take care. Have a good night. But yeah, Jay Marco, back to you. What you just said. So essentially, this lines up perfectly with my own perception of how this should operate. I mean, I look at NNS governance as a beautiful thing, right? The idea that you can basically take a fixed supply of tokens, distribute them, and then have on-chain governance. And you can put a DApp. You can put like an on-chain DApp. You can govern the evolution of an on-chain DApp or a treasury or something like that. And I know it's more involved, right? I think because there's, when you raise money through the SNS, a treasury gets created and like there's things that are more involved here. But ideally, like I would love to see a situation where anybody could essentially take a token, right? A token supply, distribute it, and then create uh, like submit proposals. And anybody in the NNS, like users would have to add, like in MetaMask, if you add a network, you could just enter in like a canister, like a ledger canister, and suddenly you can see all the proposals for that token. And then in terms of like fundraising, it's not terrible. I mean, there's so many ways to do fundraising and so many like setups. I feel like the NNS probably wouldn't even need to get involved. There would just be tools, almost like we have token launchers, right? There would be tools for doing these kind of sales. And then yeah, dude, the NF. I look. I come from Cardano, and so we have a system called Catalyst, which is literally a protocol-funded treasury, and it is a self-funding protocol treasury. And I saw a lot of good work over the years come out of Catalyst, and it worked very well. Um, these things aren't totally analogous because Cardano, the way that system worked, it wasn't through like on-chain governance. It was through, you have to submit proposals. There's reviewers. There's milestones. Like it was more. It wasn't like on chain and automatic, but it worked really well. And Catalyst funded a lot of projects and builders who were building things that weren't for profit. And so when you invest in an SNS, you're expecting a return. But there's like a lot of things that ecosystems need. It might be infrastructure, right? It might be an explorer. It might be, some infrastructure that just makes it easier to develop. And in many cases, the whole community will want these things, but nobody wants to front the capital. But if you have a protocol funded treasury, right? And somebody submits a grant, everyone's jumping in and saying, "Hey, yeah, let's give this guy some money," right? And it's tied to very specific milestones and I don't know, man. So I'm totally in agreement with you. I would love to see something that's just more of a dynamic and open system, and that has different incentives. Yeah, and I don't know what that would take to get there, but um, yeah, as the NF stands right now, it hinges on me. Like the whole hinge problem is whether or not Definity neurons are giving the majority of the funds. If they aren't, I'm content with just letting the system, like, it's fine because people are volunteering their maturity, right? That's their decision. But certainly, like, as we've seen, it's not something that is really working. It's not producing really compelling startups, and there's a whole wide range of builders who need money to do things that are sort of shut out from this system, right? And so, or they have to go to the Definity grants program, which, from what I've heard, again, it's very strict, which is a good thing in many ways. But I mean, there is no way for the NNS, for us as people involved in this decentralized ecosystem and this decentralized governance process, there's no way for us to distribute grants, right? So yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. I think that makes the most sense with, having that fund be for, like, like a grant system that um, provides support for building out tooling for ICP. But as you said, the key thing with that has to be milestone based. You can't just give a lump sum of money to people and just hope they develop what they're supposed to develop. It should be in small portions, given like a salary, and then, but based on if they hit their milestones, the next part will open up to them. Or I think it has to be something like that. Which I think the orbit thing is building tooling for stuff, more complex systems like that, I think. But yeah, I agree with that part. But in terms of the SNS, I think the SNS should simply be only for. It shouldn't be a fundraising thing. It should only be for projects that are already successful, or already have product market fit, are already generating revenue. Because when you think about it, um, blockchains really are just they are decentralized businesses that sell block space, whether it's Ethereum or Solana or whatever. It's a business. They have to make revenue. They have to turn a profit. They have to turn their token deflationary for people to act. I mean, people speculate on the token before they become profitable, and the price might go up. But ultimately, it has to be sustainable. They have to make revenue selling block space. And I think even projects built on blockchains, like a SNS project, they have to generate revenue and make a profit as well. So that's one thing I think projects need to show to become an SNS. They should show what their financials are. How much money, how much revenue are they making? What's their expenses? How are they going to become profitable? So I think that's what the biggest issue with the SNS is. People aren't treating them like businesses, which they are. And for them to be successful, they have to turn a profit on the token and make the token become deflationary, so it can increase in price. So I think that's what the main issue with the SNS is. We need to start treating these projects as businesses, and not just something that you're supposed to be speculating on. Because if you do that, the token's just going to get soft rug, like you've been seeing with a lot of projects. And that's why you see the probably one of the most successful SNSs has been Alice, which asked for no money, right? Because it already was sustainable in itself. So that's what I think SNS projects should be going forward.
I mean, in a way, I like back to I feel like the governance system that ICP enables should be open, and you shouldn't need to. I don't know. Like, right now, you have to submit a proposal, and then it gets accepted, and then you do a fundraise, and then the tokens get distributed, and all this stuff happens, and then, right, you're an SNS DAO, and people can submit proposals, and that's cool and stuff. But I feel like I like open systems, open protocols, and so if there's a on-chain governance protocol, right, where I can build a DApp, I can put it on ICP, and then I could I don't know, govern that DApp with a token, or something. I would love if there was just an open way to facilitate that without actually having to go and submit a grant and then tie that to a fundraise, right? So you can create like a DAO, and then users have to selectively go and configure like what in the front end. Hey, I want to track this person's proposals, and if I have tokens, I can vote on them. And then the fundraising should be handled by the projects. And again, companies, builders, entrepreneurs will build systems to facilitate fundraisers. This is like what happens on every other ecosystem. Um, and they can raise their money, or there's like a protocol funded treasury, right? And so it just for me, like a system like that, it expands the possibilities. It expands uh, in terms of the kind of emergent mechanics that you would see. It opens up the possibilities. And I think we were talking about this earlier, this idea of just build. I think Zane was saying this. It's like you build for expressiveness, or extensibility, right? And you don't necessarily try to zoom in on one particular system. You just enable a number of of expressive mechanics, and then you let the customers go and figure it out, right? And compose the different systems together to and eventually they'll figure out something that's ideal, but like the choice is put in their hands, right? You're not dictating this is how it has to go. You've just created the systems and then opened the door. So again, I mean, that's my perspective, but I'd love to, Zane, Cupcake, Troy, Jay, Marco, if you guys have other things, man, love to hear from you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think the reason why the SNS was the way it is with the NNS proposal and stuff is because there was so much money attached to it. Like you can't just have that money available for anybody to like. It had to have been the SNS that was giving that large amounts of ICP out. That's why I'm saying that the fundraising thing should be separated from the SNS, so that the SNS could just be a thing where anybody can really launch one whenever they want to, because there's no money attached to it really.
Yeah,
Um,
no, we're in total agreement on that. Like again, just an open system, right? For
yeah,
governance, it enables a degree of on-chain governance, treasury management, et cetera, et cetera. Right? It's not tied to one very specific thing where you have to go raise money from investors, right? That's very it pigeonholes it, and then it blocks off like a lot of it. It constrains things, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
And
Troy.
also take in consideration that the SNS is not only limiting in how the raise happens, but also what you can do with it after you raise the money. Because like perhaps around a year ago, Definity added a limit on how much a single proposal to cash out the treasury, like a max tokens that each proposal can take out of the treasury, and then there is a cooldown, and that was meant so the owners cannot instantly rug pull the community, which is nice. It's in some cases, but then again, if you cannot trust them to not rug pull you, how can you trust them to actually build the product you gave them money for? And in some cases, it might be too limiting because if they need a lot of liquidity in a short time frame, they cannot get that. So yeah, again, the foundation should just empower and increase the potential for like the emergent uh, possibilities that come out from a healthy ecosystem of people building stuff, rather than dictate how the network should be used and mm, like yeah, essentially that having guardrails for users.
Go ahead, Troy. Troy, did you want to jump in?
Hey, I built a standalone kind of a DAO system. I talked about it on another space you had, Zane, about a month ago, but we've finished it now, and it's part of our Axiom project that's alpha testing starting next week. But anyway, I got a video of it in the nest. I won't bore you guys with with all the details of it because I would take 15 minutes to explain it. But basically, it's a standalone little system where the token holders control the project and can do worker proposals and stuff like that. And anyway, that's it.
Yeah, to be fair, I think Dfinity is aware of this problem because I think that's what the Orbit platform is for. I think from what I understand, it's tooling to allow you to customize rules for how your SNS DAO is set up. I believe. So maybe that Orbit platform helps this issue when it comes out.
Wasn't Orbit just like multi-sig and like a permission system for treasury management? Zane, you probably know more.
Not really. I've only heard about it, still haven't used it. I think it's open to everybody now. It used to be gated, like you had to be given access to it, but I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, I'll do. I saw Orbit on the roadmap like a while ago, and I briefly looked into it. But yeah, you can definitely go to the website because Definity's been posting about it. Yeah, we should all go take a look at that. Yeah, I'm fuzzy on the details there, J Marco.
Yeah, I watched a video of Jan and their lead head of engineering, and they went through the whole roadmap, and that's where I heard the explanation of Orbit. That he acknowledged these types of issues with the SNS and how it's not been successful with the token launches, and that Orbit is supposed to help that by giving tooling to provide more customization in how management of the SNS treasury and stuff works. So that's what I feel like I understood from it.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought it was something where like if Zane and I wanted to put some like create a wallet and we had to sign with our internet identities or something, right? And it, like to disperse 50 ICP from like the pool, we both had to sign. I thought it was something related to that, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, I looked over it. I went to the website. I need to get more concrete about the actual details, but it looked cool, for sure. So again, but the one thing is just like I feel like there's so many things. I mean, Zane talked about this today on Twitter, but there's a lot of stuff happening on the app level, um, and I do wonder. This is a bigger topic that we don't need to get into tonight necessarily, but I feel like they're really Definity has so many really talented engineers. Um, I just wish there was a little bit of I don't know, like there's like the protocol work and then the product work and the something about it just to me feels a little bit I don't know if it's like I feel like it's getting spread thin or it's just confusing and muddying the water for me, but I feel like there should be one group of people where it's like 100% protocol development, that's it, nothing else, um and then maybe a product arm if necessary. I don't know, but like some of the execution on the product to me has been a little bit lackluster. And again, I just am like, is this just a side effect of being spread thin? I was looking at some of the Orbit stuff, and I'm just thinking, like the execution at the product level for these things isn't what I would expect. And if you want to create like a successful product, you have to have things a little bit more polished. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And if you're interested in the topic, I've actually had a discussion with Christopher, who he is a dev who just recently joined Affinity, and like between yesterday and today, kind of depending on the time zone, we discussed exactly about this topic. So the because I noticed that the foundation is going like is opening up new products, like starting development for new products. Like they've announced this software marketplace they want to build, and I wasn't really into that. So yeah, maybe look into it, that discussion. But in my opinion, what the foundation should do is first and most focus on the protocol itself, and then once the features are done, maybe build some infrastructure like libraries or some system canisters, which make the devs' lives easier. Or if they really want to build something that is outside of the protocol, but it's still low level, maybe some libraries. For instance, it would be really nice to have databases that can be reliably used. It would help a lot because that's something that everybody runs into if they want to build a big application, um, rather than doing these fully application layer stuff like the SNS, Orbit, and so on. Because I mean, just look at Orbit, for instance, okay? So we know it's been in development for a year, more or less, maybe a bit more, and at least a dev was assigned to it. Now, a Definity dev is really expensive. So I think more than 200K has been invested into developing Orbit. Now, if you were like, if Definity had posted a bounty saying, we want this product built and we're going to give out 200K to whoever builds it first, or like whoever reaches this milestone first gets the project and the first, I don't know, like $25,000, uh, it would have made it easier for them to just focus on other stuff, and also attracted people to the IC. Because I mean, we already have some funding mechanisms in the form of grants and also some bounties, but you have to know about them and how they work. So people outside the community are not aware of how easy it is to get a grant, how much a grant usually is. So, and they are not even aware that there are bounties for some like public good infrastructure stuff like libraries. You essentially have to go on the forum or find um, like some post on Twitter by the Definity account. So it's not advertised that much. And perhaps this is something that could change and take some weight off Definity's shoulder, attract more talent, and yeah, foster a better community. Especially because I think a team of engineers which has skin in the game of, and the game is whatever they're building. So let's say you're building a wallet and you really care about that stuff. You're ultimately going to build a better product. If you give a task to a team of engineers who don't really care about, um, I mean, that use case in particular, they're going to build it just fine, but it's never going to be excellent because they lack that introspection from someone who also is a user of what he is building. I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, again, thinking back to, it was funny because in Cardano, like when I was in that ecosystem, it was a small ecosystem, but there was like 15 wallets, and they were all competing for Catalyst funding, right? Because the wallets were not profitable. They had to pay developers to develop them. But what you saw slowly was like the quality of the wallet products got better and better and better and better. And the winners stayed and they gained market share and they gained adoption, and then the losers kind of fell away, and the losers didn't get funding anymore. And so then all of a sudden the only wallets that were still standing were like the best of the best, and they were really good wallets, like insanely well designed, um fantastic wallets. And this is like all these developers were focused on, was building the best wallet they possibly could. If you have an engineer where, again, I don't know who's working on Orbit, but it's like if you have an engineer who's on salary, or it's like a foregone conclusion, I'm going to make this much money working on this. The incentives are not necessarily there to incentivize going above and beyond in every aspect. And then again, there's no competition um, necessarily. So yeah, I think you're on there on the mark there, Zane.
I also have to imagine with ICP at $5, it's much harder to fund innovation and development and build a bigger team at Definity. If ICP was at $100, there'd be innovation coming from everywhere. So the price does drive the growth as well. So it is important, even though we say don't look at the
Yeah,
price.
that will certainly help. But supposedly, Definity has a big war chest that they have reserved for fostering the ecosystem. So, like doing community events, grants, and so on. So I don't think that's the main concern. The problem again is even if you hire more people internally, uh, it is still not the same as like an actual healthy ecosystem, because as Zen said, when you have skin in the game, first of all, so you're building something that you have experience with, so you know, because perhaps you are a user of the thing you're building, you know, uh, like what's needed, you know what's missing from the existing products. And when the success of what you're building determines whether you get the next paycheck or not, that really drives you to do your best. If you are an engineer with a stable job and your boss says, okay, you have to build this, uh, you just do it as you were tasked, you still get a paycheck. Now, if that product is a failure, that is not really your fault because you build it as the spec required. So having the competition, the drive for like gaining um, a market share, to have dominance in the market, is what creates the best product. And I don't think you can get that just by making Definity's team bigger.
Yeah, and the other thing, just lastly, is typically I remember like back in the day, if you're a grassroots builder building a product, especially if, once you start raising money, your entire reputation is on the line. In crypto, entire reputation. If the product fails, that will follow you for the rest of your days, and you just see this with builders or people who have launched meme coins or just done any stupid thing. It's like there's so much pressure once you get into building. It's a different dynamic. Whereas if you, let's say, work for a foundation and you're tasked to work on this project and you're not on CT and you're mostly anonymous, and the foundation tweets it out when it's ready, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's a different dynamic. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm mostly agree with you, Zane. Like I think if here's the thing, like if the product execution was exemplary, I don't think I'd have an issue. I don't think I'd have an issue as much. But looking at the execution, I just can't help but think that there's a problem of being spread too thin, of not having the talent, and of the people that you do have, there isn't the correct incentives. Um, right, and it's like the whole incentive, it's weird, like just the incentive structure between having the foundation develop a product, the side effects that then trickle out into the ecosystem. Yeah, it feels a little bit weird. So um yeah, I would. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know how it's necessarily resolved at the end of the day. But yeah.
Yeah, I have to say though that to be fair, the foundation has started to like moves some stuff to external, um, say, companies or teams. Uh, but it seems for whatever reason they're still pursuing some new projects in the HEP layer. So it's still not fully eradicated, still there, but they have changed a bit in their ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, I don't know if you guys saw Magnus Carlsen on Joe Rogan. So Magnus Carlsen is the world chess champion, or he has been, and he was talking about the difference between discipline versus obsession, and essentially being like the best chess players aren't they are disciplined, but largely they become amazing at chess because they're obsessed with chess, and they far outperform the people who are merely disciplined, right, at learning chess. And I was thinking, like, there's an aspect to that, I think, in crypto and in hiring and in startup culture in general. Like, you want people to be building products who are obsessed about it beyond money, right? I think that's just a general principle, and like you want to foster that dynamic in the crypto ecosystem. You want to attract builders who are passionate about what you're doing, and ICP has like a great pitch. I mean, World Computer. There's so many really compelling ideas in this ecosystem, um, and yeah, and I don't know if it's like, again, because if the foundation was putting out exemplary products, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But you want people who are obsessed. You don't want to necessarily hire based on who has the shiniest resume, who has like you just want people who are insanely, like, they are obsessed with what you're doing. Um, and it's beyond money. So yeah, that's the final thing I'll say on that. Anybody have thoughts?
And keep in mind, these people that joined the foundation, for most of them at least, especially the OG ones, their obsession is cryptography, is like designing the protocol stuff, right? So even for them, being tasked with this more secondary stuff has to be kind of boring, annoying, because you are shifted from whatever you're doing, which you're really interested about, to this other project, because it becomes the priority, but you're not that interested. So even for them, it takes a toll. And I think, and for some people I know, that it has been one of the reasons they've moved on, because they weren't able to focus on what they wanted. And that's a shame, because not only we have lost the time and the opportunities, but we have also lost the talent to other projects.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I don't want this space to just devolve into doom. I think there's a lot of good that's going on, but I think it's incredibly healthy to have these discussions, especially with the cutting edge experts like Jordan and Zane. I think we've been running it for close to 3 hours now. The space. I'm thinking about probably winding it down here. I want to give everyone a chance to chuck in some final thoughts. Zane, I really appreciate you coming up, man. It's been a while, but it's always a pleasure to hear from you, and I hope we can do more of these. I hope we can. It's hard to have like big picture critical discussions. It's why, like, I guess it's good. You identify all these things that could potentially be improved, but I'm always left with kind of like, okay, well, what do we actually like? What's the actual practical next step? And that's always a question mark for me, is how do you actually like focus in on a high priority area to go and actually spend time working on. Um, and that's why, like, again, after these conversations, I'm always trying to at least leave with, okay, like, what's a practical thing, what's a principle, what can we all take home and think about in the coming days and weeks in this ecosystem. But no, it was good, man. I hope we can have more discussions, and more focused discussions, and maybe I'm definitely going to look at tuning into I don't know what working groups you're a part of, but I'd love to just be a fly on the wall when you guys are talking about this stuff.
So firstly, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking about the IC, and I could go on for hours. And I know that usually tends to become always a bit doom and gloom, but that is only because for me, there is like not much of a point talking about all the good stuff we have, because it would just be an echo chamber. Like I think many people already know about all that stuff. So I want to touch on the more pressing issues, how we could improve, and so on. But Dfinity and the IC has all the cards to succeed. It's just about using them in the right way. Because I mean, the Dfinity has done an excellent job. There are ways the protocol could be improved, but like, tell me something that cannot be improved. And they have the talent. I've been there. I talked to them, and I talk to some of them regularly. And yeah, I mean, they're good engineers. So I trust that they can pull this off, and that's why I want to see them pulling it off. On a practical note, I'm not so sure. I just think it would be nice for the IC community to perhaps stop drinking the Kool-Aid and be too maximalist, and maybe start pushing Dfinity towards improving some of the stuff that we have talked about, me and Jordan. And I mean, that's pretty much it, I think. Yeah, nothing to add.
Well, and where would be the best place to do that? Because I'm split on this. I feel like the guys who are delusionally bullish are actually very useful to the degen crypto ecosystem. Like, I think they offer huge value. The guys who are just bull posting like every single day, it's just positive. But like, it's very, very useful to have that. But it's also like, if you've ever worked at a startup, like Zane was saying, typically you're not focused on what's working. You're perpetually focused on what's not working, and you're like obsessed with how do we focus on like what isn't good, what's lackluster, how do we, that's the mentality, right? It's not like let's ignore everything and just look at everything that's good. So I see it both ways. I think on Twitter it's really helpful to have, highlighting the good stuff, um, and maybe not necessarily airing out like these brainstorming critical discussions, but I think, maybe on spaces we can do some of that, and in the working groups. Like, so where would be the place to have those, like, let's actually zoom in and have a productive discussion about where things can be improved?
That's a tough one, because I'm not really sure. The forum would be a nice place to start, because that's where most devs usually are active on. Uh, Not so sure about the working groups, because it's been a lot of time since I've taken part actively in them. Like a few weeks ago, I joined one in the scalability working group because the topic was subnet performance improvements, but unfortunately, it was not like the one I was hoping for, but still nice stuff. And they are very technical. Usually, like, they either showcase something that the foundation has done and then do a Q&A, or they talk about standards and so on. So it's really technical, and maybe not like a forum kind of place to share ideas. That is more for the forums, I guess. And I agree, we need bullish sentiment and maxis, but I would like if the I don't know, like, if we didn't pick fights with all other projects, because that's not a good look overall. And sometimes the arguments I see used are not completely true. And I think we should always be honest, because the truth always comes on top at the end. So it's not nice as a community to be seen caught in a lie. So yeah.
Well, appreciate you coming on, and yeah, let's work behind the scenes. Maybe we could do another space on a different subject if people want to talk about something, or maybe we can figure out just a way to have these kind of discussions outside of the context of a super technical working group session. I don't know. We'll keep exploring ideas, but
Maybe even very simply, whenever Jordan posted something, just posting some comment to support him, because he gets a lot of hate, and yeah, that doesn't help his cause, and it must feel bad, because I think he's always right, or almost always, and it's not nice to be called a father or a hater just for speaking out the truth.
Yeah. No, I hear that, man. Yeah, it does seem to work that way. That's how it turned out tonight. So that's a possibility. Let's do some final thoughts, and then I'm going to do shout outs, and then we'll wrap this space up. So, Zane, final thoughts?
I think I already pretty much said everything, but yeah, the foundation again, a lot of great people. The protocol has a lot of functionalities. It's great to develop on. It can be better, and if the foundation wants it to be, it definitely can be better. It can become better. So it's just a matter of how the priorities are shifted. Uh, but yeah, I don't know what else to say. Thanks for having me on.
Troy, any final thoughts?
Zen, thanks for holding the space. Zane, thanks for answering my questions earlier. And hopefully, Zen, you'll be doing a space next Tuesday too, because I'll have the Axiom.info launched on the chain, and we'll be alpha testing it for anybody who is interested. Thanks, guys.
Cupcake, final thoughts.
Then maybe you want to pencil in your schedule also a celebratory spaces for the final seed round in April.
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. Yeah, everybody is patiently waiting, man. It's really exciting for that to be that milestone to be approaching. We'll definitely do a space, just like we did with the million ICP burned. We'll definitely do a final seed unlock space for sure.
And also the million canister count.
Yeah, we could do something for that as well, for sure. I'd love to it'd be cool to do a space with just a bunch of the engineers, a bunch of the builders, get those guys on to just talk about the IC. Yeah, that'd be fun. Jay Marco, last man on stage, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just believe that the near term North Star for ICP is to be to be the premier choice for Web3 development, um, and and to be a Web3 cloud platform where Web3 builders in any ecosystem will find it to be the easiest and best place to build their dApps. And with that being the case, you might not necessarily need this crazy infinite scalability that Jordan was talking about or looking for, and it might be a more realistic thing um, in a place for us for the network to get product market fit and be successful in the near and medium term. So yeah, that's my opinion. I think that that's just some food for thought. I think that there's a lot of positive things going on in that area, and not it's not all doom and gloom. And I think ICP is trending in the right direction.
Perfect, man. Yeah, I'll just echo that. I think these discussions, man, they can sometimes sound, pretty, like you said, doom and gloom, or, something is broken or something's not going to work, and it starts to make you question your investment. I don't look at it really that way. I think at a principle level, there's so much like the ICP vision, World Computer Vision, on chain applications, on chain governance. So much of it makes sense. It's just a question of, okay, how do we actually make this work beyond just talking about it, beyond just kind of buzzwords or um, metrics? Like, can it actually work at a deeper level? And I think tonight that's what we were just diving into is How will this actually work? What are some of the real challenges that we're going to face on this journey, and what are the considerations? So, and by the way, I didn't say this earlier, but Fabio just had a tweet. We're like 2.5x away from being deflationary. Um, like, as soon as ICP is deflationary as a token, I would say as an investment, you're pretty safe at that point. Like it's not going to take. I mean, we only need so many more projects to get us into a deflationary zone, and at that point, it's like, product market fit, no product market fit. It's like the token's deflationary, right? So at that point, you're collecting your maturity. It's going to work out. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out, a lot of things to be excited for, and let's just keep working together, man. Let's not pick fights. And these guys, like these engineers, these guys that are on the cutting edge, when they come out, when they have ideas, even if it's not uber bullish, don't just immediately jump to conclusions. Like, just take it in stride and look at it as this is somebody who cares a lot about the project, and they're dealing with the actual challenges as a developer, and let's hear what they have to say and support them, and just support constructive conversations in general. So I'll end on that. I see a few people joined. Drowny, what's going on? We're actually shutting down the space right now, but I'm going to run down the list. You know how it goes. We're going to do shout outs. Shout out to Troy, Zane, Cupcake, J Marco, Drowny, Mega Synergy, Jason, Swissy, RVD, Faro, Bambino, Oisy Wallet, Blockchain House, Meta Owl, Corporate Cats, Aj, Official X App, Stu, Ledger, Legend, Rizzo, Salville, Gamris, Sunny.icp, ICP Guy, Alex, IC Plumber, RDGZ, Guy, a Rosetti, Bev, Brandon.icp, the Jose, Wah, Only Fans, Derek, and Big Tech Cloud, and the 6 anonymous listeners. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Zane, thank you for coming on. Jordan, thank you for coming on. Give these guys a follow. Support what they're doing. These guys are really at the cutting edge. These are the builders. These are the engineers. So give them a follow. Support what they're doing. This is ICP General, guys. I am Zen. We will catch you on the next one. Good night. God bless, and take care. Bye-bye.